What's up, and welcome back to another live stream with Gizmo Slip Tech. It's a glorious day. I've got three incredible laptops in front of me right now. I've got the Razer Blade 18 that I'm live streaming from. We've got the Scar 16 with the incredible QHD 240Hz 1100 nits brightness screen, and we're gonna go over all the specs of this guy. We haven't done the formal unboxing yet of this guy. I'm gonna re-put it back in the box after this live stream, and we'll do an unboxing of this guy probably tomorrow. And then we've got the Zephyrus Duo 16 that features the new Ryzen 9 7945HX. And I'm gonna go through all the specs here in a moment. But yeah, I'm really excited today because we're gonna focus on a CPU-centric live stream today. We're gonna be comparing the i9 in the Scar 16 against the Ryzen 9 7945HX. And we're gonna go through how to undervolt both the i9 and the Ryzen 9 7945HX, and I can tell you there is gains to be had both in Intel and AMD through undervolting. It basically efficiently increases the performance you get at the same time as giving you better temperatures, higher clock speeds. It's pretty exciting, and yeah, so that's the premise for today. I'm really excited about it. You madman, you! I know I've never done this before with two laptops side by side. We're gonna have to work out the camera angles and see exactly how all this is gonna work. But I've got a bunch of benchmark programs installed on the computers here, so it's gonna be super interesting and a lot of fun to try out something new here. So before we get going, the goal for today, right now, the next step is gonna be going over the specs of these two machines. Let me go ahead and get the diagrams pulled up here. And then I'll switch the camera here in a moment. All right. So this right here, let's make sure that the camera switched. Yep. Okay. All right. This right here is the specs for the Scar 16. It actually, wait, it costs $36.99, not $35.99. I just realized, I believe. And it comes with an i9-13980HX. Let me double check the price on that real quick, actually. Because I want to make sure I give you guys the right information. So this is my laptop list. You can use this to check the prices and figure out where to buy any laptop that currently has an RTX 4000 series. And you can see the Scar 16 is $36.99. $36.99. So it is not $35.99. Anyway, so this is the spec. So $36.99, correction there. i9-13980HX. This is the highest end i9 that you can get. But the key thing about the Scar is that the BIOS does limit us in terms of how far we can undervolt and overclock this machine. Okay, so just know there are some limitations on this Scar 16, and especially with i9s, we've seen significant silicon lottery performance differences between different i9 chips, with the best performing i9 I've seen so far in the MSI GE78HX. And also MSI lets us fully undervolt all the different aspects of the CPU. So we saw much higher performance from that MSI GE78HX than what we're going to see from the Scar 16 today. So I do have a preview of that performance that we saw during the unboxing. Let me pop over to that window here 1 second. I got so many different tabs open. So right here we have this is the undervolted score that we got with the i9-13980HX inside of the GE78HX. We got 36,673. We're going to see if we can beat that today with the undervolted Ryzen 9 7945HX. And then for a 10-minute score, which we're also going to see if we can beat, we got 33,429 for a 10-minute score with the GE78HX with an undervolt. Now the stock scores were, let's see if we can get the stock 10-minute score here. So this is the, let's see here. $30,478 for stock score. So it's clear that the Ryzen 9 CPU is going to have higher stock scores, but when you factor in undervolting, that's where things get really interesting between the i9 and the Ryzen 9 7945HX. So popping back over to the spec sheet here, you can see that both of these laptops come with DDR5 4800 megahertz 32 gig dual channel RAM. All right, and we're going to take a look at those timings in the CPU Z here at the start here in a moment. Both of these laptops have RTX 4090 150 watt plus 25 watt boost, and they both feature QHD 240 Hz 1100 nits displays, though we did test the Zephyrus Duo 16 and the display brightness was 1018 nits. There is G-Sync and Advanced Optimus on the SCAR 16. I don't believe those features are on the Zephyrus Duo though. Both of these have 2 terabyte SSDs. And a lot of the other specs are very similar, though the webcam, I believe, is higher than 720p on the Zephyrus Duo. And it does have Windows Hello on the Zephyrus Duo as well. So here's the specs for the Zephyrus Duo. We got the Ryzen 9 7945HX, and we're getting up to 128 watts of TDP through this, which is less than what we're seeing in the i9. This laptop, because the Ryzen 9 7945HX is a more efficient power efficiency processor, it doesn't need to go as high of TDP to push as high of performance. And both RTX 4090s in this can go up to 175 watts, but keep in mind with the Duo, if you're in turbo mode, I believe the maximum, at least according to Asus says, is 155 or maybe 165 watts. So you get more TDP to the GPU when you're in manual fan mode. The Duo also has a secondary display that's 3840 by 1100 Gorilla Glass, and it does have stylus support on that secondary display, so you can draw on that display. So I want to point that out. And yeah, other than that, the ports are pretty similar between the two, but the Zephyrus Duo 16 does have a micro SD card slot. That's the primary difference between those two. Checking chat. Best friend of dog asks, 7945HX is a 16-core part? Yes. So that is absolutely a key part of the differences between these CPUs. The i9 CPU has 24 total cores. That's 8 performance cores and 16 efficiency cores, right? The Ryzen 9 7945HX has 16 performance cores and no efficiency cores. So twice as many performance cores on the Ryzen, but no extra efficiency cores. The total threads between both CPUs is the same at 32. So in terms of multi-core workloads, that's where these two are going to be very competitive, right? The fact that the i9 has only 8 performance cores does, I guess, help it when it's trying to get single core clock speeds, because those 8 performance cores can take up a bigger portion of the CPU die potentially. I'm not sure exactly how all of that works, but that's just kind of my guess or understanding of how everything works on these CPUs. Okay, so, all right, so reading more of chat real quick before we get in here. What's up? Good evening. Yes. Razer's very difficult to buy in Europe and USA. Delivery time over 4 weeks. A lot of these laptops have long delivery times because it's really high demand right now, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, I invite you guys to like the live stream if you're enjoying this or you're going to want to see or enjoy these tests. It does help the YouTube algorithm know that these tests are worth sharing with other people. Okay, so let's move into getting these laptops set up, and let's take a look at CPU-Z with all of these cores and information. This is going to be really challenging to get set up, but let's try to get you guys positioned just right. Now, one challenge of this doing two laptops is that these laptops are pretty close together. So some of the exhausts are kind of blowing into the other laptop. So it's going to be an extra difficult cooling experience between these two machines right now. I just kind of wanted to point that out. Now, you can see... all right, I think you should be able to see both of these side by side. So the SCAR 16 is over here. We have the i9. And then over here we have the Ryzen 9 information. And if I zoom in as much as we can, we're still seeing everything. There we go. This basically gives us an overview of our CPUs on both of these laptops. we do have, it's so interesting, the different design choices that they went with. But you can see right here, we have 8 performance cores on the i9. So right here, 8 performance cores, 16 efficiency cores, both 32 threads. The Ryzen 9 is 16 cores, 32 threads. I'll just go cycle through these different tabs in case there's information you guys want to see on these tabs. So here's the motherboard information. Here's our memory information, and notice that our cast latency is both 40. Our RAS to cast delay is 16. Actually, this is interesting that these are changing right now. I wonder if I should put it into some kind of a CPU workload just to get it to pop up or populate correctly. But notice, so right now it's showing correctly. So 39, 39, 76, and 115. Let me just put this, I'll put this into a 10-minute workload here in Cinebench R20. And there we go. Interesting. So these are changing as it engages with the Cinebench R20. Our memory speeds are changing there. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting that these have very similar RAM speeds with a total of 4,800 megahertz on our DDR5, and they're both 32 gigs. So in terms of RAM speed, it should be very, very similar. It looks like the modules are not the same brand, but they are the same rated speed. So Micron, I don't know I guess Micron made this RAM for the Zephyrus Duo 16, and then we have SK Hynix RAM in the SCAR 16. And we'll pop over to the graphics. We have, I'll pop this over to the right here. It's interesting that right here, it's listed as 115 watts inside of CPU-Z, but we did see 175 watts of power to the Zephyrus Duo. So here we're in our bench. We can go ahead and let's just do this one. CPU-Z benchmark comparison. Let's see here. Right now, well, before we do any tests, let's just do a quick one because these are quick. We'll just do a quick one here. But right now, the i9 does have a 30 millivolt undervolt, and the Ryzen does not have any undervolt right now. So multi-core performance, we can see that the Ryzen was 350 points more on the Ryzen. So, and then for single core, the i9 beat the Ryzen by about 65 points. So it's interesting results and divergence of performance already. And yeah, so let's go. Slick Rounder, just in time. Looking forward to the undervolting of Ryzen. So shout out to Slick Rounder for pointing me in the right direction for figuring out how to undervolt the Ryzen chip. All right. Yeah, and I do think that both of these laptops will benefit from RAM upgrades if, as long as the AMD BIOS can support the increased RAM speed. Okay. I did do a test today. I released a short on the channel. It's a 1 minute long short comparing the Blade 18 versus the Scar 18 in like 10 game benchmarks. And the Razer Blade with 5600 RAM was faster than the Scar 18 that only had 4800. And the memory is the primary spec difference between those two, though I do wish I could retest the Scar 18. But now at least I've got a Scar 16 here, and I can redo all my gaming tests, and we can see if we get the same performance with the Scar 16, or if the Scar 16 actually outperforms the 18. Maybe something was bugged on the 18, preventing us from getting as much performance, because we've seen several laptops outperform the Scar 18 test that we ran previously, and I just want to get to the bottom of the reason why, because I would not expect the Scar 18 to underperform compared to the competition. And the reduced RAM speed is probably the only thing that I can currently think of as to why maybe the Scar 18 was going slower. But the Omen 17 also had 4800 RAM, so I don't understand. Anyway, All right, so let's go over quickly how to undervolt both the i9 and the Ryzen. We're going to start off with the instructions on how to do that. So I'm going to probably make this a separate video on the channel. So I'm just going to do a quick intro for that. So what's up? We're going to show you how to undervolt the i9 processor with the Asus Strix ROG SCAR 16. And then we're also going to show you how to undervolt the Ryzen 9 7945HX Ryzen CPU. And it's actually more simple than you would think. So really quick, let's go ahead and do the SCAR 16 first, and then we're going to hop into the Ryzen undervolting. All right, so I'm going to get the camera set up pointing at the SCAR. Now, the SCAR 16 has limited undervolt potential. Other laptops do have more undervolting potential. So the SCAR 16, the main way you do it is just through the BIOS. All other undervolting avenues, I believe, are locked down. Intel XTU does not let you undervolt. Throttle stop does not let you undervolt because of the BIOS locks. Now, so the first step really for when you're undervolting the SCAR 16 is just turning it off, and then you go into the BIOS, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. Let me get the camera switched. So here's the SCAR 16, and make sure the camera is good. These displays are already at like 20% brightness, and they're still so bright they like blow out my camera. Like the white parts of the display blow out the camera. It's pretty nuts. Like I can raise there we go. I can raise the exposure, but then it just ends up going nutso anyway, no matter what I do. Okay. All right, we'll shut down. All right, and so we're going to go ahead and get into the BIOS. I believe it's F2. It might be F12 to get into the Asus BIOS. And Asus did release, I think it's F12 to get into the BIOS, okay? Now, Asus did release a new BIOS, and we're on the latest version of the Asus BIOS that was released at the beginning of March. Now, unfortunately, it's actually bugged still. So they still need to work on this BIOS a little bit, but let me go ahead and show you. So basically, at the main screen here, you press F7. That's going to pull up the advanced menu. Now, when you get to the advanced menu, you scroll down, and all undervolting, dude, just so you know, you're responsible for your own laptops, okay? Undervolting's been safe for me, but if you put the wrong settings in, you can damage your laptop, so be careful, all right? And worst case scenario, typically with undervolting, though, is you just have to reset the BIOS and everything works fine. I've never personally seen a laptop damaged from this, but I'm sure it's happened somewhere where someone put the wrong setting in somewhere and it messed something up. That said, Asus doesn't really let you change much. It's very limited voltage settings. So right now, Asus says, like if I zoom in here, you can see Asus claims on the BIOS that you can do a 80 millivolt undervolt, and yet, see, range is 0 to minus 80 is what it says. And yet, when we go to do a 80 millivolt undervolt, it says not within input range. You see that? Not within valid input range. So the most it still lets you do is only 30 currently. So we're at 30 millivolts undervolt. So in order to do this, this will be disabled normally. So it'll look like this. You switch it to enabled. You'll put in 30 or maybe up to 80. And then you put minus instead of plus. Okay? And that's it. That's how you undervolt the SCAR 16. That's the only way you can do it. Unfortunately, all that does is change your P-core undervolt. It doesn't change your cache undervolt. It doesn't change your E-cores undervolt. You're not undervolting the integrated GPU. There's no undervolts applied to anything else. And if you want to maximize your undervolt, right now you can't do that on the Asus laptops. You have to go with a different brand like MSI or whatever. But today we're doing an apples to apples comparison within the Asus brand, right? Both of these laptops are 16-inch. Both of these laptops are 16-inch chassis. They both have liquid metal conductinaut extreme applied to the CPU. So in theory, they're as fair, in my opinion, as you can possibly get. And they both have the same RAM speeds as well. So, and similar-ish timings to the RAM. So in terms of a raw comparison, like the closest possible comparison, I feel like this is pretty dang close as to what you're going to get between a Ryzen and an Intel CPU. The thing is, we know there are faster, more capable i9 chips out there, like in the MSI GE78HX or maybe the GT77, or even my Razer Blade 18 is faster than the Scar 18 because of the undervolt settings I can apply to it. So that's kind of my rant right now on the i9 inside the Scar. We're going to see how it does against the Ryzen. The Ryzen should demolish it, but know that there are faster i9s out there, okay? All right, so we're going to go ahead and show you how to undervolt. Well, let me go ahead and verify that the undervolt took inside of HW info. So this is how I verify. I'm going to put it into HW info, and then we're going to go in here. And I'm going to close that. All right, so down here, usually we would be able to see core voltage offsets in here. It's not showing us that option in here right now. So I guess that's where I would usually check to see if the undervolt's being applied. Maybe we do need to update our version of HW info, but they'll usually be right in this. There'll be a drop down that says voltage offsets, and you can see that it have a -30 applied. But I have verified that you get a performance gain when you change that setting in the BIOS. So, all right. Next, we've got the Zephyrus Duo over here, and I have the brightness way down on the Duo here. So let me change here. All right, let me pull up chat. HW info is up to 7.0 now, or 7.40. Yeah, I need to probably update my HW info install that I use. Okay, so let's go through all the steps you need. So first up, you're going to need to download the AATU. So I can type in AATU and it'll come right up. This is the AMD tuning utility. And I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the description to this. Let's see here. All right, and I'm grabbing the link and I'll put it in. So I'm going to put the link right into the GitHub where you can download this application. Again, everything is done at your own risk. So it's basically, they call it the Universal x86 Tuning Utility, which you'll see in a second. But if I go over this AATU document real quick, you can see, let me reposition this a little bit better so it's in focus. All right. All right, so this is designed to undervolt Ryzen mobile CPUs, okay? But it can also work on desktop APUs. This is not going to necessarily work on every single Ryzen laptop out there, so it's important to recognize that. There are some adaptive modes, and keep in mind that when we use this utility, we can see some pretty big performance gains. Now, I didn't test all the different functionalities of this, but I just go over to the release page on the GitHub, and I downloaded the latest Universal x86 Tuning Utility, and it's the Windows download. I just downloaded this guy right here, and this is the linked page that I put in the video description. It should be there now. Anyway, so you download this guy, and then you open it up. So you have to unzip it, and it's called UXTU. So Universal x86 Tuning Utility. And you want to open up this file right here. Universal x86 tuning utility. So you double click that guy and in the extracted folder, and that pops up with the tuning utility window after about, I don't know, it takes a little while to open up. So you got to give it, I don't know, about 30 seconds or so to open, in my experience. Yeah, there it is. Okay. All right, so here is the utility window now. And let me go and turn the light off behind me. All right. That way, you guys don't get as much screen glare. I want to know if the Scar 16 has backlight bleed. It has none. 0, just like all the other mini LED panels that I've tested so far. Okay, so once you get in here, I go down to this tab with the little gauge on it, all right? And then you have the curve optimizer settings, and this is the only thing I've touched inside of here, okay? And you can undervolt this up to -30 is what I've heard, but I haven't tried going beyond 30 because I started crashing at 30 millivolts basically instantly as soon as I started running. As soon as I started running the Cinebench, I started at like 10, did 20, and then jumped up to like 25. Then I tried 30, and I crashed at 30. And this basically what I've experienced so far is I crashed at 30, and very quickly I switched it to 29, crashed at 29 after a few minutes. So I dropped it down to 28, and I didn't crash for like an hour. And then now I'm going to go ahead and do -27. All right. But before we do that, let's go ahead and make sure this is set to 0. All right. And we're just going to see. Let's see what the i9 does against the. Let's see what the i9 does against the Cinebench R23 test with the Ryzen and i9 pitted against each other, right? So we're gonna get these two together. I need to make sure in my process lasso is also setting things correctly here, because I was using process lasso to try to enhance performance a little bit. And yeah, I'm gonna change my affinities down to I believe it's, I have process lasso installed on both, so let me just double check what the affinity is on here. Sorry, a priority, I mean. So we're just gonna do above normal on both Cinebench windows. All right. So if you guys, I'm gonna zoom in so you can see what I'm doing here. Process lasso is a tool designed to let you prioritize what task you want to be favored for your CPU performance. And so I just hit it to be above normal on both systems. So that way we have a fair test. And that way it's less likely for any other tasks in the background to interfere with our Cinebench R23 performance as well. So it's kind of a double whammy that makes this testing better, I think. Have I tried using Ryzen Master? I have not tried it on this one, Salem. But there may be other undervolting options available, right? So right now, just to verify our settings, we have an all-core undervolt of 0. These are stock settings right now. But inside of Armory Crate, all right, we are in manual mode with raised power limits up to 130 watts, okay? And inside of the SCAR, let me show you the Armory Crate settings we have set up. We have a manual fan mode, and it's set to 140 watts. All right, and both of them are set to maximum fans. So max fans on both, power limits on both, set as high as they can go, so for as fair a comparison as we can possibly get, okay? And keep in mind that AMD and Intel may not recognize the same level of like wattage the same, all right? These are different CPU architectures, and the way they rate their wattage might be slightly different. The most important thing here is what kind of performance we're actually going to get from them, given that they're both in 16-inch chassis, both have liquid metal applied to them, both have the same RAM speed applied to them, right? So that's kind of like my focus, is trying to make it as apples to apples as possible. That's why I did not go with the GE78HX for this test today. I could have, but I didn't. Okay, so and then we also have Process Lasso, kind of trying to even the playing field even more for Cinebench R23. All right, so I do want to make sure HW info is open on both systems, and so we can look at the data as we do these tests. All right. Is the Zephyrus Duo 16 GPU 175 watts? Yes, it is. They're both 175 watts. When you're in manual mode, they both are 175. All right, so we're going to put HW info up on both sides. Now, keep in mind that we do have the slight undervolt applied to the i9, though it's such a small undervolt, it's really not going to make that big of a difference. It's going to make like 300 points difference, probably somewhere in that range. All right, it's very small performance gains from undervolting the SCAR. If we could go to the -80, that would help, but that's part of our issue. All right, and for this, we're gonna try. We're gonna close. Now that we know that I've shown you Armory Crate, I'm gonna close Armory Crate on both laptops. I'm gonna close all the other services and applications that we have running. All right, so that means no Steam, and no like gaming software running in the background. BattleNet, we're closing that. All right, so they've got essentially the same applications open for the most part. All right, and this is going to be tiny undervolt on the i9, no undervolt on the Ryzen, and I'm going to show you guys the results side by side. It's so hard to get these exposures to like show the window better. I guess I just got to set the EV to go higher. I don't know. Let's see it. I'm going to go medium brightness. So we're going to set both displays at 50% brightness and see if that'll help us. It seems like the SCAR is just a little brighter right now. Okay. All right. There we go. All right. So I'm going to back it out, and then we're going to start running a test. All right, and then we're going to see what we get for performance. All right, so there's our package temps. Scroll this down. You can minimize this and this. All right, so there's our CPU clocks and package temps, and here's our CPU clocks and package temps. So we got both the clocks and the temps pulled up on both systems right now. Side by side. It's going to be hard to see them from this far away. I know that, but we're doing the best we can right now. All right. So here we go. We're going to do a Cinebench R23 run, and I'll zoom in on HW info once we get started, and then I'll zoom out on the score that we get afterwards. All right. So we're going to get started. Shaboom. All right. So here you can see that the Ryzen chip is getting 4.8 gigahertz, and the Intel i9 is doing 4.3 to 3.5. Okay, on both sides. You can see that's a very different architecture, just way more cores on the i9 being activated. The package temps on, so we got up to 90 degrees on the i9, 91 peak temp. The Ryzen got up to 81 peak temp. This is gonna be a lot more interesting when we start doing a 10-minute test. Okay, so our default scores, we got 34,475. And let me see if I can get, I don't know if I can get the Cinebench window to show us the score. Probably not. I guess maybe like that. Will that work for us? I think that'll work. All right. Yeah, that should be pretty good. All right, so we got 32,049 on the i9 chip in a single run, and we got 34,475 on the Ryzen 9 7945HX. Asked me to refocus the camera. That's the best I can do, I think. All right, so I would say just reserve judgment until after all of this is done, right? We got to get through all these tests, and then we'll be able to get a better idea of performance. So let's try running 5 in a row side by side, and we're going to just see what we get, okay? I accidentally clicked twice on the SCAR, so let me stop on both of these and we'll just restart this. Give them both 5 seconds to reset here. All right, and we'll zoom out just a little bit. All right, and 3, 2, 1. I believe they're going perfect. All right, so you can kind of see the race of these two coming together. And I suppose I can make the R23 window a little smaller so we can see a little better of the side-by-side performance. And we can see which one races to get done first. It's so close, but the Ryzen gets done just a little bit before. 34,488. Let's do another run, starting now. Boss XXL Gaming says you can't get a perfect score because background apps use the CPU without noticing. Well, that's why I'm using Process Lasso to prioritize Cinebench R23, just in case anything else were to interfere. So 34,458, 32,265. Let's go to the next run. So far, we're not seeing any performance degradation between these two. No drop in performance yet. But we're going to do a 10-minute test here in a moment, and that's when we're going to be able to see the temperatures and the average clock speeds between the two, and all of that. Now, once we 34,000. Wow, they're both saying the same on terms of performance right now. Maybe there's enough of a gap between running these that they're just being perfect right now in terms of performance. Maintaining their high levels of performance flawlessly so far. In order for the SCAR 16 to do 32,000 consistently, though, it needs to go above 140 watts, which after a few minutes of running it, it is going to drop below that, where the Ryzen shouldn't have that problem, right? So now we got 31,894 on the i9, because that's the SCAR 16's long-term power limit of 140 watts starting to kick in. Look at those fans fire up. Sorry, man. The fans have been fired up nonstop because they've been in max fan mode the whole time. So still over 34,000 on the Cinebench R23 on the Ryzen chip, dropping down to 31,700. So that shows you some performance fall off happening on the i9 chip, but you really have to go for a longer period of time than this to see the full performance drop off from heat saturation and the lower power limit kicking in on the SCAR 16. Now the SCAR 16 shouldn't have heat saturation happen. The power limits are set so the power limits on the SCAR 16 are set low enough that you don't actually run into hardcore thermal throttling at all on either of these CPUs. So before we continue, let's go ahead and show you what kind of performance we can get if we undervolt this sucker on the Ryzen 9. So let's apply that curve undervolt. Right now, the UXTU is opening up right now. Like I said, it takes. I clicked it down here. I put a shortcut on the window, so I'm gonna go and zoom in here. So here's the undervolt. We're gonna go ahead and do a 27. I mean a minus 27. This is where you can get into trouble if you do the wrong thing. So on the curve optimizer settings, we're gonna do minus 27. We're gonna apply that. Settings applied just popped up in the bottom right. All right, and now we're gonna try running this guy. I'm gonna go and close this. The undervolt stays applied even if you close UXTU, so that's fine. And you can set UXTU to run when you start the machine. All right, so we did 34,290, though it kind of has a range. You know, we're on 34.4, 34.5. I've even seen 35,000 at the best single core run with no undervolt. Let's see what we get now that we have an undervolt. Dun, dun, dun. Shabam, 36,055. 36,055. Oh, yeah. That's some really nice performance. And if we want to, we could keep running it over and over again and get pretty consistently over 36,000 from what I've seen. Ziddy N says, is that hella good? That's pretty dang good. That's pretty dang good. We've seen a bit higher than that on the MSI GE78HX and the GT77 with the i9 being fully undervolted across like the cache and the efficiency cores. But yeah, so there's 35,963. We do have Armory Crate open right now, so let's close Armory Crate. Yeah, it's nuts. Anyway, let's go ahead and do a 10-minute test now. See if we're stable for a 10-minute test. And we'll do a side-by-side 10-minute test between these two. And we're going to look at our clock speeds, our power limits, our temperatures, all of that. All right, so let's go ahead and get into a 10-minute test now. All right, so we're going to pull up HW info on both of these machines. Why did Armory Crate not close down? We should restart this. All right, because I told Armory Crate to close like 5 times. I didn't want to close. Anyway, let's close. We're going to close every single window. We got Process Lasso open. Let's close that on both of these as well. All right. It's fine if it's open in the background. It's very minimal. And it's open. The most important thing is that it's equal on both sides, right? So, all right. Everything that's open on one is open on the other. Okay. So, are we ready? Cameras are good. Ready to start this? Shabam, shabam. Wait. I accidentally tapped on. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right. So, and we're going to reset our averages as well down here at the bottom. So we get our average temps, we get our average clock speeds, and it's all going to be visible here. Bingo. Shaboom. All right. Okay. This Ryzen seems like the perfect CPU. I think it's really, really good, but the lower single core, we're going to do a single core after this, and you'll be able to see that the single core performance is lower, all right, on the Ryzen. That's probably the biggest downside or drawback. Now, let's go ahead. I'm going to pull this down just a little more. We need to see a little bit more on the i9 chip here. All right, there we go. And now we can see our wattages on the i9. You can see that we got up to 171 watts on the SCAR right here. And we're averaging 160 watts so far on the SCAR 16. And then for our Ryzen chip, we're just going to make this bigger as well. We're getting 124 watts on average through the Ryzen chip, all right? Now, stock out of the box, when I did the Zephyrus Duo unboxing, we did a 10-minute test, we were getting like 4.7 to 4.6 gigahertz on all of the P cores. Like the upper half of the P cores gets a like 1 gigahertz, 0.1 gigahertz higher performance for some reason. And the second half is down by like 0.1. I don't know if that's just silicon lottery within the chip, because I believe it's kind of like two chips put together. I'm not sure. Or if that's just inherent nature of like one chip being prioritized over the other in the CPU architecture. I'm not sure, but right now we're getting noticeably higher clock speeds on the Ryzen chip now that we have undervolted it. It went from like 4.7 to 4.6, and now we're doing 4.88 to 4.75 approximately between the two core sets. So that's like an increase of like 0.2 gigahertz on both. And also notice our temperatures on both are better. We're averaging right now on our core temps 82 degrees on the Ryzen so far. And let's see here, what are the other temps should we? So our core temps are 82, but our CPU is 86.8. But I believe without the undervolt, I believe we were pushing over 90 degrees. I think we were like 92, 93. So we dropped, I think, 5 to 6 degrees by applying the undervolt, which is very good. It's obviously very helpful for our overall temps. And looking at our SCAR temperatures, all right, we've got our temps and clock speed on the SCAR, 93 degrees on the CPU package, 83 degrees on the core temps, all right? So overall, like the SCAR is running warmer now, but that's mainly because we are not able to fully undervolt the SCAR 16, right? We're doing an undervolted Ryzen right now, a heavily undervolted Ryzen CPU against an undervolted i9, but it's not fully undervolted across the cache and the E-cores and everything. But essentially, this is still an apples-to-apples comparison in terms of like these two laptops are optimized to the best that you can optimize them currently, right? How low are you able to undervolt the Blade 16? So I haven't done extensive undervolting yet with the Blade 16, but it was basically minus 125, minus 80 on the cache, and minus 125 on the E-cores. Can you do a comparison between the SCAR Mini LED and the GT77 Titan screen? Are they the same? They're not the same. One's a 4K 144 hertz panel. One's a QHD 240 hertz panel. In terms of brightness, the SCAR is going to be a little brighter, I think, but they both have extremely high levels of contrast. They're both really good. I want to focus the questions, though, mainly on our CPUs today, okay? So those are the kinds of questions I'm going to focus on in chat. I want to focus on the Intel i9 and the Ryzen 9 7945HX. AATU is great. If you're lazy, you can also just set a temp limit. It's interesting that everyone that's talked about this application calls it AATU, and yet the application itself is called Universal x86 what is it, tuning utility? So it's UXTU is the proper acronym, I believe, for this application, not AATU. It's weird. I don't know if they changed the name halfway through. Even the old website says AATU, and now all the GitHub documents say UXTU. So I'm going to call it UXTU instead of AATU. Good explanation and assessment. Personally, I would be interested if you limited both to, say, 120 watts and see how they performed around that. Dude, if we limited both down to 120 watts, I guarantee you the Ryzen would crush the Intel. But there's no reason to do that, because that's like, I personally think that's a very unfair test. Limiting them both to 120 watts because the way the manufacturers rate wattage is not the same. And to say that you're doing 120 watts from Intel and 120 watts from AMD is not the same. And they're not designed to run at those wattage levels, right? So I personally don't think that's a very good test or testing methodology. Now, I think the better testing methodology is if you could get the same exact laptop and display, same everything, and just switch out the motherboard and the CPU, and then you isolate the wall power input from the wall directly, right? So you're saying I'm going to do 250 watts of power when under a CPU benchmark load from the wall. And that's how you could like isolate the Intel versus AMD power limit differences. As it is now, I think the best way to test them is to limit them by just like right now, basically what we're testing is like 16-inch chassis in a very similar cooling thermal solutions, both with liquid metal conductanate, both of them at maximum possible performance with the same RAM speed, as much that can possibly be the same, we're leaving the same right now, right? Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and examine everything again. Now that it's several minutes into the test, we've got 2.5 minutes left in our 10-minute test. Our all-core speeds on the Ryzen chip are now averaging 4.8, 4.85, 4.82, 4.78, 4.67, 4.7, 4.65, 4.7. So basically 4.85 to 4.7 across all of the cores. Our CPU temperature on the Ryzen chip now is peaked at 93 degrees Celsius. Our average temp for the whole 10-minute test so far is 90 degrees Celsius on the package, 85.8 degrees Celsius on the core, and our package power has averaged 123 watts of power to the Ryzen processor. All right, so looking at our Intel i9 performance, we're averaging 4.0, 3.9 across all the P cores, basically 4.0 almost exactly. Across the E cores, we're doing 3.33 across almost all the E cores. Our CPU core temps are 83 degrees on average and 92 degrees on the CPU package. Now, if we were to fully undervolt this i9, I would anticipate 5 to 7 degrees drop in temperature with an increased level of performance. Like my Razer Blade 18 does like 4.2 gigahertz across the P cores and like 3.4, 3.5 gigahertz across the E cores, for example. So with a more fully undervolted i9, you can definitely expect better levels of performance. So, but the interesting part is that overall, the temperatures are very similar. Whoa, we got an error on our Cinebench 10 run. You guys see this? Right as the Cinebench run was almost about to end, we're in the last 30 seconds. We got an error here indicating more information can be found. Bug report, unsaved scene files. Oh, that sucks. Oh, my Asus popped up with a notification indicating that something was ready to be updated. I wonder if that messed something up. I don't know. That sucks, though. I really want to get our 10-minute test. We got to get a 10-minute test in. It could also be that our undervolt caused it to throw an error. So I'm tempted to undervolt just a slightly lower undervolt. Check out the Zen 4. Its power is cut down to 23 watts. Yeah, the Zen 4 was the AMD CPU. It stopped doing as much power because of you know, we basically, I think, through either an error. We're going to try going down to 26, minus 26 on our all-core turbo here. And we're going to go to minus 26 for our undervolt now instead of 27. See if we get any errors there now. me go ahead and exit this. All right, so we got our temperature right here. So we got our 10-minute score for the i9 being 30,775. All right. So we got to do this test again, unfortunately, because of the silliness of a Cinebench R23 crash. All right. All right. But 30,775 from the SCAR 16. Let's go into a 10-minute test again. All right, and we're going to reset HW info on both of these machines. There we go. All right, so we are reset on both machines now. Beautiful. All right. King Dragon says, did you know the HP ZenBook Studio G6 has an RGB keyboard and 4K 120 workstation laptop? That's cool. All right. Lift laptops, please. Oh, both laptops are listed, Britt. Both of these laptops are lifted by the power adapter right now. Both laptops have the power adapter lifting them up. So they have a bit of extra airflow for the laptops. And I kind of did that because they are side by side next to each other too. So I wanted more airflow in general. So yeah. Zio says, I hate that the laptop CPUs basically all come from the factory overheating. If it thermal throttles or power limit throttles under Prime 95 small fit condition, then heatsink VRM isn't good enough. So Zio, the SCAR 16 does not overheat. Neither of these I think would overheat under default settings. But right now we're in manual settings, right? And they are we're pushing the performance limits to the max. And well, looks like, yeah, so basically we did have a slight moment where it hit overclock or overheating throttle. But it's going to go below, like the power limit, once it goes to 140, it's not going to be thermal throttling at all. It's interesting because this did thermal throttle right here, 97 degrees right now. You got to keep in mind that we are running this, we are running both of these laptops side by side with minimal airflow between the two of them too. So the temperatures I would anticipate in this type of scenario are going to be warmer than if there's no other laptop next to it, because we got kind of hot air blowing into each other here. And I've got a fan blowing air into this room as well. So hopefully we can keep enough cool air going into this room with these two high performance laptops being benchmarked side by side with each other. Is your video kind of grayed out as well? I'm not sure what you mean. I'm about to ask if it's a fair benchmark having both laptops close to each other, but now it's fair since they're lifted. Yeah, they are both lifted. You can see I have them both lifted about 2 inches off the ground in the back. And the thing is, these two fans are blowing into each other. These two fan exhausts are blowing into each other, but at least the air intake is not being blown directly into, at least. The whole YouTube video looks gray. Is that happening for anyone else? I'm confused what you mean, man. All right. It's interesting. Our clock speed averages are kind of all over the board right now on this Ryzen chip. I'm gonna look a little closer here at the Ryzen chip because that's a little weird. I think HW info might just be messing up. Because our clock speeds look about what there should be, 4.8 to 4.7. I don't know. Maybe they just need more time to average. That's weird. Video says fine here. Yeah, Massis, maybe try restarting. Yeah, I was gonna say restart your stream. It should be all right. My city of Rio is warmer than this between the two laptops. Yeah, that's true. Martin Whedon says, hello, what's up? How's it going? Well, it's going well so far. We just ran into an undervolting error, I believe, on the Ryzen chip, though. So we're trying to rectify that issue right now. And so we had to restart our 10-minute test. Hopefully we don't run into any errors again. Zio, actually, so you can set the polling period on the HW info to 200 milliseconds. So my guess is that the HW info may be bugging out because of process lasso, which is it's a tool that you use to prioritize your CPU. Right now I've got process lasso prioritizing Cinebench R20 on both laptops. So HW info in both laptops basically is being deprioritized by a little bit. Nice room heaters, yeah, that's right. You could use these as space heaters for benchmarking if secondary, you know, if you're freezing in the winter time, it's great. When I was crypto mining, so I was crypto mining on 16 laptops last year before Ethereum went to proof of stake. When I was crypto mining on all those laptops, I had them in my garage, and it was like a whole room heater. And then like certain rooms in my old house used to be a lot colder in the winter. So I would like put a couple of those laptops doing crypto mining in like the colder rooms to heat those rooms better. And it was great because it like helped balance out the temperatures in my house. I'd be like, this room's cold. We don't have enough heater airflow going in here. So I just put a couple crypto laptops in there and it was good to go. You say that if you look at the timer on HW info, it's lagging behind. Well, I reset it after the fact because it took a little bit for me to reset it. I don't think it's not lagging behind because of that, for that reason at least. Our clock speeds up here, I think, are averaging higher than what it's registering. This one says 4.6 gigahertz, but we've been hitting like 4.8 almost the whole time. The actual clock speeds are good, and the undervolt's definitely being applied, I think. You know, we're getting better performance than average. So far in our 10-minute tests, we're down to the last 3 minutes. We are now doing 93 degrees on our Ryzen chip. That's getting close to thermal throttling levels over here. And notice our power. I did notice some power limits being reduced a little bit on the Ryzen chip as we got close to the 10-minute mark in my last 10-minute testing. And like the last 2 minutes maybe, like the power limits were going down to like 115 or like a little bit less, which was a little weird to me. So far, we haven't really seen that. We've seen them like dip a little bit in between the tests. I mean, overall, we're doing 123 watts, which makes sense. Our SCAR 16 is doing 143 watts for the 10-minute test. So our i9 chip, at least as they're being recorded by Intel and AMD, is doing about 21 watts more on the i9 chip. Our core temperatures right now between these two are 86 on the Ryzen and 84 on the i9. So the i9 has slightly lower core temps, but the package temps on the Ryzen are 2 degrees cooler at 91.4 versus 93 degrees on the i9. So very interesting differences between these two laptops right now in terms of temps. I'm just really hoping we get through a whole 10-minute test here. We can get everything here. So Martin Wilson with the 200 CZK donation. He says, again, great stuff here. Thank you, Brandon. Dude, I'm happy to be as helpful as I possibly can be here. All right. Like I have never seen anyone do an undervolting guide on the Ryzen chips. So again, do your undervolting at your own risk. But from what I can see, it appears to be safe. We probably need to do long-term testing. I don't think Ryzen CPUs have done as much long-term undervolting testing, but in theory, it should not damage your processor. In theory. And it should give you better performance. All right, so I'm going to zoom this down so we can see our We have 45 seconds left on both of these tests. We're getting so close. Slick Rounder with the $2. Thanks so much, Gizmo, for the Ryzen undervolting. No problem, man. I'm glad I can test this for everyone and kind of help y'all get. I just use y'all. I'm a texting now, I guess. Glad I can help everyone get their most performance out of the machine possible. Is the i9 better than the Ryzen 9 in Fortnite? That was one of the games I was thinking about testing today. I was going to try to do a couple of CPU-bound games in these tests as well. So I've got like 7 synthetic tests we're going to do today. And then I've got like a handful of games I wanted to just test that tend to be CPU-bound. All right, so here we are. Our temps and thermal limits are remarkably similar. We got 35,028 for the Ryzen, and we got 30,719 for the i9. So almost 5,000 more points for the Ryzen when you undervolt it. 35K is the highest 10-minute score I have seen so far from any laptop. All right, and we're gonna go to. I'm gonna show you the GE78 Raider. So this is the 10-minute test. Well, this is the single core test. Oh, that's the stock test. Let's see here. So this test 33,429. That's with a properly undervolted i9. This test is more comparable, I think, to this 35,028 that we got here. But in terms of the 2 laptops we have before us from Asus, 2 16-inch laptops, both with liquid metal, both with the same RAM speeds, all of that. This is still still a valid comparison test in that sense, but it's not necessarily the best test I think we're going to see from Intel. But still, very interesting. 4,300 more points from AMD this year in Cinebench R20 10-minute test. So let's just calculate this up, right? Let me pull this into view. All right, so we got 30,792. We're going to minus it times 35 minus 28. So that's a difference of 4,236, and we're going to divide that by 3782. And we got that the Ryzen, when undervolted in these 2 chassis, is 13.76% faster than the SCAR. All right. And if we were to use the i9 in the GE78HX from this test, right, this 33,429, if we were to use that as our number, 33,429, minus this undervolted number, 28, we're talking 1599, and then we do 33,429. So the Ryzen, when its 2 optimal undervolted chips, was 4.78% faster than the i9 in multi-core. Now it's time to do single core. All right, it's single core test time. And this is where things get interesting for Intel, I think. All right, so let me go and close the calculator down. You know, it really shows you that your choice between i9 or Ryzen this year, I think, is really going to come down to, do you want to focus on single core performance or multi-core performance? That's going to be one of the biggest indicators. Well, we don't want to do a 10-minute test for this. We want to do a once-off test, because we don't want it to restart. It takes twice as long when it restarts. Okay. Wow, that Ryzen broke the game. Yeah, so the AMD CPU is almost 14% faster in Cinebench when undervolting. So 13.78% faster when both are being undervolted. Now, look, you can already see that the single core speeds here are going to be better on the i9. It's going through more blocks faster on the i9. And that to me is fundamentally kind of Intel prioritizing their single core performance within their CPU architecture. The Intel has done two 10-minute tests in a row. Yeah, they both did two 10-minute tests in a row. They both did two 10-minute tests in a row. So, how is the battery on the Ryzen? I have not done any battery life testing yet, but Asus themselves claims that it's not that great, at least with these 16-core 32-thread Dragon Range CPUs. I think for Ryzen battery life, you're really going to probably want to go for the 8-core, 4-nanometer, I believe it's Phoenix line, which is like the 7745HS, I believe is the name of the processor. So, Mohammed says, damn, man, laptops are getting insanely powerful. My 12700F desktop only gets 22,000 max. Yeah, laptop CPUs have had huge generational gains in terms of performance. We need an 8-core Dragon Rage 7745HX part, alternatively the 7940HS or 7840HS. Yeah, for battery life, you really want an 8-core Ryzen, I think, this year. We got to do actual tests, though, right? That's just my guess right now. I am not going to be doing a PassMark, I don't believe. I mean, unless enough of you guys really want it. I did not download it, at least. But we're going to be doing Blender. We're going to be doing CPU-Z. We did already do CPU-Z, but we didn't do the undervolted version of CPU-Z yet. Phoenix is the real mobile CPU. I mean, these are both mobile CPUs. You can't say this is not a mobile CPU. It fits inside of a laptop, and it crushes multi-core performance and sets new records right now for multi-core performance. At least in these synthetic tests, it's doing that. So, bonkers. Thomas says, hey, I just saw that you could modify the specs of the PC Specialist. Thomas, it seems like, do you work for PC Specialist? I think you keep commenting that. Is PC Specialist special to Europe? I think it is. Anyway, Tech with Sean says, on most all of the Intel HX laptops, you can disable the E-cores in the BIOS if you want. Yeah, that's something that Asus added, actually. You can disable the E-cores to potentially boost single-core performance slightly more, or just the raw performance of those 8 P-cores. I have not done that yet, but maybe I'll do a live stream dedicated just to that. That's one of the things I'm very curious. GT77 owners are getting over 38K multi-core with their 13980HXs. Yeah, so that's extremely rare. That's with extreme undervolts, and that's very unlikely to be stable. Like, my undervolting has become unstable after, I don't know, like, if I go too high, like, it's hard to get above 37,000 with the i9. Let me put it that way. It's hard to get above 37,000 without reaching instability. And so the idea is that with the i9 chip, you can undervolt it to more extreme cases, and you can probably run Cinebench for a single time, not a 10-minute test, but a single time, and get above 38,000 in certain i9 chips, right? Like the best Silicon Lottery chips, 38,000 is likely possible. But show me that 10-minute score from the same GT77 owner, and I'll bet you it's going to be less than like 34,000. Almost guaranteed it's going to drop to like 33,000 something. So that's the main thing I would respond to someone that's getting over 38,000 in Cinebench R23 is show me the 10-minute test. And that's where, most people doing multi-core workloads, they're going to be doing, they're going to render a 4K video that's a half-hour long episode or whatever. And they want to see if it takes 10 minutes to render that 30-minute video. They want to see the performance over the full 10 minutes, not just like a quick burst, right? They don't want to just see like, oh, this is 30 seconds of performance. They want to see 10 minutes of performance. So the other tests we've got for today would be we're going to do Geekbench 6. We're going to do Timespy CPU test. We're going to do Firestrike CPU test. We're going to do CPU Z benchmark. We've got the Blender tests for Classroom Monster and Junkyard, I think is what they are. And then we're gonna do and then we're gonna do a couple of games, a couple of CPU bound games just to show some people side-by-side performance. Okay, so the i9 chip is done. The Ryzen chip is still going to town. The i9 chip, you can see you got 2172. 2172. All right. I'll kind of zoom out just so you can see. Dead Space Remake. Yeah, a Dead Space Remake would be really good. I was thinking Wars. Oh, I can't do Warzone side by side, but I can do Dead Space Remake. I don't think I can do CS:GO. I got to do non-online games. Okay, so, and here's our single core score from Ryzen, 1946. 1946 versus 2172. That's a big difference in single core speed. Big difference. Let's check the calculations. It's time to calculate up this difference, just like we did for multi-core. 2172 minus 1946. That's 226. We're going to divide by 1946. So the i9 chip is 11.6% faster than the Ryzen chip when in single core mode. So, and the thing is, a lot of video games still use single core. So if you're mainly a gamer, the i9 chip is almost for sure going to put up better frames per second in esports games that are CPU bound. So pretty dang interesting. All right. We're going to move on to our next test. Some excellent results, by the way. Some absolutely excellent results. And now let me show you, I did in my testing last night. I went ahead and saved some screenshots from my tests just to show you some best case single runs. I believe this is my best case single run test. Let me kind of zoom in here. Look at that. 36,565 and 1929 for the single run. Yeah, so we got a little lower on the single run on this one, but 36,565 for our Cinebench R23. Pretty freaking nutso, right? Pretty freaking nutso. That's a single run, though. That's not a 10-minute run. 10-minute run, you're going to get quite a bit less at 35,028. I did do a 10-minute run here, and this 10-minute run's interesting. It got 35,322, so a little bit higher in this 10-minute run. So, anyway, pretty awesome. Let's move on to our next benchmark. We're going to do, we got Handbrake today too. We're going to do a Handbrake render test. Actually, I want to do Handbrake next. Handbrake is Handbrake should be a very good representation of performance. And for this test, we really need to be in standard GPU mode. All right, we need to have the i9 chip encoder because the integrated Intel chip can sometimes help boost render speed. All right, so I've got this render file. All right, so we're gonna pull this in. And we're gonna do a 4K render to 4K render. And we'll do it at fast 60 frames per second, 4K HEVC. Are you brewing coffee? There's like a hiss sound. I believe you're just hearing the fans, my friend. Moa with the super chat, 250 SAR. Thank you so much for the donation. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all the support from all the super chat, everybody. All right, so we gotta turn this brightness down. It is freaking blindingly bright. All right, Handbrake. So now that I restarted the SCAR, I gotta exit everything again. All right, so the key here that we're going to look at is going to be our render speed as well as the total time. So the rendered FPS, we're going to look at that, and then we're going to look at our total time to render. All right. And we're going to keep HW info in the back on both of these laptops. That's not what we need. There we go. All right. And we're going to set this to be the exact same type of render. 4K HEVC. All right. And that's good. That's good. We're set to the exact same settings. So you are right, ERG, that some of the games that use the Ryzen multi-cores are gonna do a bit better than the single core scores from Intel. So there are certain games where Ryzen may win or be at least more competitive. All right. But in general, the i9 architecture having 8 P cores just gives it an advantage in gaming because there's less. You can focus more. I think their CPU architecture focuses more on those 8 P cores to boost performance. Okay, so we're going to start encoding. Everything should be exactly the same settings. All right. Boom. We're starting the encode. We're going to reset our timer on both. All right, so we should be able to see everything here. All right, and I'm gonna focus here. So right now, our FPS average is our average FPS right now is 25.9 on the Ryzen and 24.6 on the i9. 24.2. Interesting. So the Ryzen right now is averaging about 1.5 FPS more, and it is about 1% faster, or like 1% further along the test at 11% versus 10%. Intel QuickSync, yeah, I don't know if Intel QuickSync is being utilized in this. It does not appear to be. I'm not sure what settings you need to set on Handbrake to get Intel QuickSync to boost it. Maybe we got to change the codec that we're rendering with. Let me see. Intel QuickSync. So if you don't know what Intel QuickSync is, it basically utilizes the integrated GPU from the i9 chip to boost rendering speed. So looking at here, it says it requires specific Intel drivers in order to use them. Supported formats are MP4 or MKV. So we might need to change the format that we're rendering in. So this is, I think this is a very fair comparison for CPU performance, but we should also see if we can, we'll see if we can try something that gives us the quick sync performance as well. Slick Rounder, I already thanked Moa for the donation. I really do appreciate it. I really do appreciate the donation. Yeah, it's 250 SAR. I don't know how much that is, but see here, let me see here. 250 SAR to USD. Wow, 60. So that's $66 in US dollars. Wow, that is like one of the biggest donations I've ever had on the channel. Thank you so much, Moa. I really appreciate this. In the video tab, you can select the encoder to Q-Sync. Okay, so in the video tab, you have to show me what the video tab is because I don't see a video tab. Oh, video tab, I see it. Okay, well we'll see what the settings are. These settings should be very good for giving us a better idea of performance. Okay, so let's take a look at our core speeds, right? This is very interesting. And let's look at our temperatures and wow, our temps are pretty spicy, all right? We did go up to 97 degrees on our i9. We peaked at 172 watts. Right now we're averaging 149 watts to the i9 package. And the Ryzen chip over here on the right is, let me just zoom in over here so you can see a little better, and I'll go into the i9. So right now the i9 chip's doing 126 watts on average. We did peak at 96 degrees. Right now we're thermal throttling at 95 degrees. 86 on the core temps, 95 on the package, 94.6 on the package. Look at our clock speeds though. There are monster clock speeds. We're doing 5.2, 4.9. We've averaged 5.0 here during Handbrake on a bunch of these cores, 4.7 on the other cores. That is really good. Really, really good clock speeds for a AVX workload. And so far, we seem to be stable so far with our Undervolt, right? Our Undervolt is kicking booty. Without this Undervolt, I'm curious if the i9 might be faster. All right. This because right now we're running into the thermal throttling on the Ryzen chip, and without the Undervolt, our clock speeds would probably be noticeably worse, right? Okay, so looking at our clock speeds from on HW info, what are we doing? Oh, I just reset it again. I'm an idiot, but our averages are all over the place in here. You see this? Look at this. Our average clock speeds on the P cores are like 3.9, 3.0, 2.7, 2.6, 2.7. Our E cores are 3.0, 2.7. What the heck is even going on with our clock speeds on the Intel? That's so weird. We're definitely pushing a ton of performance through here, though the clock speeds are not that high. It makes me wonder if we are utilizing the Intel integrated GPU more heavily. Trying to see if we can see. The GT cores are at 70 degrees, which that's the integrated GPU. The IA cores are at 132 on average. GPU clock is only 700. So yeah, the GPU, the integrated GPU is not being that utilized, only 7%. So I don't think we're utilizing Intel QuickSync at this point. All right, so looking at our FPS averages right here in Handbrake, you can see we're averaging 21.9 so far during our render time, and are averaging 25.1 average FPS on the Ryzen chip. That's a big improvement on the Ryzen chip overall. You can always check in Task Manager. There's GPU and quota percentage for the GPU. Gotcha. Well, we're definitely not utilizing it now because we can definitely tell we're not utilizing it, right? This is just okay. So we're almost done with the Ryzen. Okay. All right. We've elapsed. It was about 7 minutes and 20 seconds, maybe 18 seconds. It flashed for a moment. I'm gonna have to check the replay to get the exact time, render time, because I didn't get to check it right there. We're going over the replay here. So it was 7 minutes and 17 seconds for the Ryzen. 7 minutes, 17 seconds. And for the Intel i9, we're doing 8 minutes and 10 seconds so far with 15 seconds estimated to be left. Okay, and then once again, I was not looking at it. I looked away at chat. I was reading chat for a second right as it finished. I really got to stay focused. So, oh no, the stream window blocked it. Is there a way to see the render history? Is there a way to see the render history? It should have been like 8 minutes and 23 seconds approximately, right in that range. Let's see here. Can we see any history? Let's see here. Activity log. Okay, so here we go. It was 501.1 seconds. And 434. So let's go ahead and let's calculate this up. 501.19 divided by 60. So that's 8.35 minutes. What is 35? So we go 60 times 0.35. So that's 8 minutes and 21 seconds. 8 minutes and 21 seconds. But, all right, so 8 minutes and 21 seconds. Overall, though, we had 501.19 minus 434.83. All right, those are our total times. You can see the total time here from Intel. You can pause the stream there on that if you want to look at more data. You can do that. Anyway, so our total difference was 66 seconds, and 66.31 will divide, let's see here. So for this, we would basically be, if we divide by 434, it would give us how much slower the i9 is, but I'm more interested in how much faster the Ryzen 7 is. Either way, it's a difference of 66 seconds. We'll divide by 434. So the Ryzen, when rendering in Handbrake, was 15.2% faster, 15.3% faster. Or really, it was more that the The i9 was 15.3% slower. That's what it was. All right, and if you were to go faster, you would divide the other way. 66. Let's go bigger mode. .36 divided by 501. So it would be 13.2. Yeah, 13. Well, either way. Oh, we did that. We did that. Okay, so it's either 15.3% slower or 13.2% faster, depending on how you want to think about it, and divide it. Now let's see if we can get a... inside of here, you said we can do quick sync. I don't see any quick sync options. If I do AV1 on video encoder, okay, right here. Okay, let's go back to fast HEVC. And okay, Intel QSV. Intel QSV, that's what we're looking for. And we're gonna do this, the closest we can on the Ryzen is gonna be H.264. Just this one that doesn't use, or maybe AMD VCE. Is that what the equivalent is? AMD VCE, I'm guessing, is the equivalent from AMD. Yes. Okay. All right. So this is going to be utilizing the integrated GPUs, I believe, on both to try to enhance the frame rate. So all right, beautiful. So we're going to do this as far as we can across both again. Are we ready? Let's do it. Starting the encode. Here we go. All right, and let's reset our HW info as well. Wow, this is going so much faster. And look at how fast the Intel is. It's doing 96 FPS now. 96 FPS. The Ryzen is doing 73 on average. So right now Intel is kicking tail. At least in terms of integrated video encoding, it seems to be faster. Trying to take a look at this is gonna finish rendering really fast. You can see that our clock speeds on both of these are very, very low CPU utilization, it looks like. Our package temps, interesting. It's so interesting. It is very interesting. Okay, so we're getting 94% or 94 watts utilized on the i9 on average. We're getting 27% utilization on average for the integrated on the i9. Our total temps are so much lower now using the integrated to render this, and it's so much faster. Overall, it's a huge difference. So we're almost done. I want to make sure that we can see everything. So 98%, 1 minute 58 seconds for the Intel i9. We're still going on the AMD CPU. There's a reason QuickSync is the hardware renderer of choice for Plex servers. Yeah, it's really efficient. Like that was such a faster render than just using the CPU, right? 2 minutes and 38 seconds. 2 minutes and 38 seconds for our AMD. Very interesting results. Okay, so looking at our activity log, seeing if I can find the timing. So we had 2 minutes and 38 seconds, and so that would be 120 plus 38. Yep, okay, so clear that. 120 plus 38, right? So 158 seconds total for AMD. And the Intel was 158, right? So that would be minus 118. So that'd be a 40 seconds faster using Intel QuickSync for video rendering using Intel QuickSync. And then we would divide this by 158. So 25.3% faster with the Intel i9 on QuickSync. Interesting. How did I enable Intel QuickSync? You have to do it inside of whatever application you're running. And inside of Handbrake, I just went into video and I clicked the codec to utilize Intel QSV, which stands for QuickSync Video. So it's all going to depend on what you're using to render. Like if you're using Premiere or DaVinci or something, you're going to have to use the right rendering mode. And you have to prioritize using the integrated GPU. And you have to not be in GPU. In order to do Intel QuickSync, you cannot be in GPU Ultimate mode. Like this mode right here inside of Armory Crate disables Intel QuickSync by turning off the integrated GPU. So you can't utilize that if you have this in GPU Ultimate mode. You have to be in standard mode. All right, excellent. All right, next test. Let's move on to the next test. Those were some really interesting results, and I'm impressed. We're getting some nice back and forth. Oh, we've got Cinebench R20. Let's do some R20 and R15. Let's do a couple. Let's do like a 5 run of each of those. Just to see. I mean, it's going to be very similar to R23, but I'm sure some people are going to be interested in seeing those numbers to compare. Siddharth, so who's winning? My evaluation so far is that for single core performance, the i9 is kick and tail. For multi-core performance, the Ryzen is kick and tail. And then for video rendering with the integrated GPUs, Intel, still 25% faster with Intel QuickSync video. So very interesting results so far. Okay, so we are going to do a 5 run on both of these and see how we do with Cinebench R20. All right, in 3, 2, 1, we'll get started. So basically personal preference in a way. Well, it's really going to come down to how you use these CPUs, you know, and what applications you use. Like, does the video encoder you use Intel QuickSync or not? So we got 13,786 on R23 on the Ryzen. And we got 12,482 on the i9. Let's run it again. We're going to do 5 runs. Where can you use RDNA 3 encoding? I'm not sure which applications support which. You really got to look into each application. But a lot of the apps will support either one these days. So 1,300 more for the Ryzen there, 13,700 versus 12,400 for the i9. It's crazy that we're getting this high of scores just recently, right? Just not that long ago. The highest laptop scores we were getting were so much less. It was like 5,000, I think. 13,800 that time from the Ryzen. That's awesome. I heard that Neural Engine is amazing on Phoenix, even faster than Apple M.2 series from Benchmark Leak suggests. Well, we haven't tested it. You really got to get down to testing it, right? And what application? Because some applications utilize these CPUs way better than others, and some of them just are incompatible too. So we're seeing a little bit less performance there. 12.3 versus 13.6. Hey, Mitchell and ERG, you guys got to chill, man. Just keep it chill. We're just having fun. All right. Try to keep it chill. Otherwise, we'll have to put you guys both in timeouts. All right. There's no point in arguing or demeaning each other. I know we're both emotionally attached to our tech and we care deeply about it, and I appreciate your guys' passion. All right, last run for these, and we'll see what our last score is. Our fifth, I think the last score is the most important score because it shows that maybe any dips in performance that you might get over time a little bit better. Intel versus AMD battles in the chat, LOL. Yeah, it can be pretty intense with Team Red and Team Blue. Holy caramoly. Okay, so in the end, we got 12.2K on the i9 and 13.7K on the Ryzen. All right, moving on to Cinebench R15 now. Been a while since I ran Cinebench R15. All right, so here we are, Cinebench R15. That's weird. What? What the heck is Windows even doing? All right, and voila. Okay. All right, that's probably the best we're gonna get right there. All right, that's pretty good. We need to be running, this is OpenGL. We need to run CPU, whoops. Well, I guess we could run this. Some people might want it. Let's just let it run for a minute. These are both the same CPU or the same GPU though. OpenGL, I believe, tests the RTX 4090, not the CPUs. So I'm just waiting for the juicy gaming benchmark tests. Yeah. Team Red, Team Blue. It's mainly a reference to the colors of their company logos. Intel uses blue and AMD uses red. All right, so 259 FPS on the SCAR, 260 FPS on the Zephyrus Duo. All right, now we're gonna do our CPU runs. We're gonna do several tests in a row here. Again, and we're going to see what our test scores are. 5,814 on the Ryzen, 5,066 on the i9. So 800 points difference here. About 800 points difference again. Wow, this one goes fast. We could probably do 10 runs of Cinebench R15. Our performance so far has been very consistent. between these two. Let's see, you know, after about 10, 15 runs, that's when I'm going to want to see what our final score runs are. I'm just going to keep them going. As soon as one's done, we're going to go to the next one. You'll have to pause it if you want to see the results as we go through here until the very end. Because the Ryzen's just going faster, so I got to keep tapping it a little bit more often to keep it running nonstop. All right, we'll do about 3 or 4 more. So far, the performance has been very consistent from both of them. About an 800-point gap being maintained on both sides. All right, so we'll do one more on both of these. And then that'll be kind of like our 15 runs just to check, see what we got. I don't know, that's probably about 15 runs. 5,847 versus 5,069. All right, awesome. Let's do Geekbench. Wabam. Yeah. Okay. Here we are. It's annoying, the HW info windows keep popping up with crap and it won't go away. There we go. All right. So we're going to hit run CPU benchmark on both of these at the same time. We'll see how long it takes to complete these. And I'll keep the, let's keep the window open with our clock speeds and power limits from HW info as well. All right. Ah, crap. I misclicked. All right, we weren't quite ready. All right. 3, 2, 1. They're both being clicked. I've got the HW info open on both. There we go. And we're all positioned correctly now. And I'll put this window over this window so we can see them being rendered at the same time. Callie with the $5 super chat. Thanks so much, man. I see you retracted your message. It's a little weird. Okay, so far, it's pretty dang close, it looks like. Very little differences. But I really appreciate the super chat. Thank you so much. It means a lot, guys, when you guys donate. And I would encourage you to consider becoming a member if you're gonna donate. That's a great way to donate and help support me over the long haul. It's $5 a month, and it comes with some perks. So there's information in the join button if you are interested in becoming a member and helping support me. Are Intel selling CPUs or ovens? What? Okay, I think that's funny. All right. Looking at our clock speeds, what is this? Our clock speeds on these are like, it seems like Cinebench isn't even hardly utilizing the CPUs. Like they're 40 degrees right now. Our core temps are 40 and 49. Our CPU temps are 59 degrees and 44 degrees, 46 degrees. Like, this is why I don't care about Geekbench. Geekbench is just such, I don't know if these are just single-threaded tasks. That's why they're counting this or whatever. I mean, right now the i9's winning, so that's probably why the power draw is so much lower. But just in general, I just don't feel like Geekbench is that useful of a test, you know? I mean, I don't think HW Info is wrong. I think Geekbench is just a crappy benchmarking tool. Yeah, at least for these laptops that we got here. All right, so our results. Pretty interesting. All right. So we got 28,067 for our single core score, and we got 2747. So we've got a bit faster on our single core score once again on the i9. And for multi-core score, 16,858 is actually faster on Intel, according to this. All right, 15,739 for the Ryzen score. There you go. There's Geekbench 6. If you care about it, I don't really care about it, but it's there. It's a thing. Go Intel, I guess. Hurrah. Anyway, let's do the Blender benchmark. I might have to download the Blender benchmark because I mean, I thought I did it. I thought I downloaded it on both, but let's find out if I downloaded it on both or not. Looks like I need to download it on the Zephyrus at least. Okay, so we're good to go on the Scar. Let's download it quick for the Zephyrus. ARP says, let's go gaming. Not yet. We're not quite to the gaming portion yet. We're getting closer, though. Did you say the Geekbench was faster on the 7945HX? Oh, no. Hello. Yeah. I like in-game tests as well as seeing both Zephyrus Duo reviews so far. I've had it ahead in synthetic tests, but behind in games and FPS compared to the other 175-watt TGP setups. Yeah, we'll see. Hi Gizmo, in Nano Review, I've compared Duo 16 to all our laptops. It seems Duo 16 is better than all laptops. I don't know if it's better than all laptops. I would disagree with that. Okay, so we're going to be testing. You guys can see this. Shabam Shibuya. Let's pull this over here. And we're going to do this right here. Is that a good spot for it? Not quite. Yeah. I guess we'll just do it on the left side of both. That's fine. The Blender window really doesn't matter that much anyway. That's just going to show us our final result, really. All right. So here we go. We're going to start our benchmark. All right, that should be good. All right, and right here, let's get the mouse in position. All right, 3, 2, 1, click. Here's the Blender benchmark. I will also go ahead and reset HW info. So they're both reset. Wow, really high draw on the CPUs, 4.4 gigahertz, 4.9 gigahertz on the two different cores. Our temperatures are spiking on both significantly. 175 watt power draw for the i9, 127 watt power draw for the Ryzen. So way more power being pulled on the i9, all right? But keep in mind that the i9 is not going to be able to sustain that over a longer period of time, where the Ryzen will be able to sustain that, okay? Temperatures on the i9 have reached 94 degrees. Temperatures on the Ryzen are currently doing 81, 82, 83 degrees max so far on the Ryzen. The i9's doing 95 degrees, a way higher wattage on the i9 though. Just the fact that the i9 can pull that higher wattage really helps give it an advantage in short bursts. Like if the burst of the test is only like a minute, if you're only going to be rendering something for a minute, the i9 should be able to beat the Ryzen in a lot more tests, I guess. You know, if the test is going to last 20 minutes though, the Ryzen should be able to surpass and beat the i9. Even 10 minutes, the Ryzen should be able to surpass and beat it in terms of multi-core workloads. All right, here we are. Looks like the Ryzen finished up just a little bit before the i9. Okay, interesting results. Ooh, okay. So let me pull these windows in closer together so you can see them a little better. Is it better? Is it better to have lower scores here or higher? It's better to have higher, right? You want samples per minute, so you want more samples. Like I don't know. Blender is new to me here. Okay, so let me just double check. I believe higher is better. Higher means more samples. Yeah, yeah. So you want more samples. So you got 262 on the Ryzen versus 219 on the i9. We got 133 on the i9 versus 159 on the Ryzen. 100.3 on the Classroom versus 124.6 on the Ryzen. So in terms of CPU's performance in Blender, the Ryzen chip is pretty noticeably faster. About, at least in Classroom, it's 24.6% faster. We need the GT77 to keep the clocks high and sustained all core loads for the i9. No, the SCAR actually has higher sustained clocks than the GT77. The GT77 does 135 watts sustained. I guess unless you manually raise the power limit to be higher, but then you're still going to run into thermal throttling on the GT77. So I would say that they're in the same ballpark. This is the same potential performance as the GT77, aside from the undervolting. The GT77 can do a full undervolting. That's going to be a big advantage for the GT77. All right. Can we do PassMark? I'm curious about PassMark. I have not downloaded it though, so we're going to have to download PassMark if we use it. I know some people in chat wanted to see it, so I wouldn't really say PassMark's necessarily a. I don't know if we're gonna have to pay for PassMark or not. Do you guys know? All right, and which one would we want to do? Is it performance test? This seems like it would be it. Free trial performance test. Is the Ryzen CPU already undervolted? Yes. We're doing all these tests with the CPU undervolted. That is correct. How much are these laptops? The SCAR is $36.99. I went over all these specs at the beginning, so I would refer you to the beginning to get all of the details. Pentium 4 CPU or higher. Download performance test. ERG performance test. Oh, this is the right one. Okay. So we want to do x86 performance test, right? All right, so I'm installing these on both at the same time. I did some tests without undervolting it with Cinebench R23 at the beginning. And both the i9 and the i9 is 30 millivolts undervolted, and the Ryzen is 26 millivolts undervolted right now. So, oh, boom. We had a crash, everybody. Interesting that we already had a crash from PassMark. So that means that we're not stable on our undervolt at -26. So far, we've been stable in all of these other tests, but just PassMark crashes us. Come on. Come on. We didn't even do it. So we're going to go down to -25. Okay. Oh, look, it wants us to do a BIOS update. Should we do this BIOS update in the middle of doing all these tests? Let's go ahead and do the BIOS update. Sure. That's so funny that, like, I guess Windows Update downloaded the BIOS update. That's too funny. Asus saw that we were doing this live stream and they were like, update the firmware, quick. Get on top of it. Let's boost the performance. How is the ROG Strix 18 coil line? So far, the G18 had the most coil line for me, but the Scar 18 didn't have as much coil line. And there's been a few users that I've read that said that their coil line went away after a couple weeks of using the laptop, so it's pretty interesting. If undervolting is disabled in 13th gen, then Intel has a major disadvantage, and Intel undervolt protection is horrible. In multi-core workloads, I would say the Ryzen is in general better. But when it comes to single core performance, the i9 is better, almost for sure, like undoubtedly better. So it depends. It really depends on what you want to do. Werner Dryer asks, do you hear any coil whine on the Duo? I have not heard any coil whine on the Duo so far, though I haven't really tried gaming with it in silent mode yet. So that's when you might hear it if it is there. ARP says, I think the Scar 17 with the 7945HX will be faster than the Duo. Why do you say that? Do you think it's going to be a higher power limit or something? Is the RTX 4090 worth it? I would say if you have the money, it's going to vary a lot from which unit model you're upgrading from to one to the next, you know, because some of the 4080 to 4090 upgrades are fairly cheap, only $400 to $600, and then other 4080 to 4090 upgrades are like $1,400. So when you're looking at and comparing performance, you really gotta like factor that in mind, right? Is the actual price on that specific model of laptop, if it's worth it. I didn't know Windows can download and install BIOS updates for you. Yeah, that's how Asus deploys their BIOS updates now. It's through like Windows Update. It's actually really cool as long as the BIOS doesn't have any bugs. It's fantastic. I love it. I love that Asus does this. But if the BIOS has bugs or something, it can be you're like, wait, why did it update to the next BIOS when you like, why is this bug happening if it's, but generally speaking, BIOS updates are a good thing, I think. ARP, you think it's a bigger chassis with more cooling? Well, the Zephyrus Duo has the screen that lifts up, so I would say I would expect the Duo to have slightly better cooling than the Scar 17. Actually, is what I would have thought. How will the XMG laptops perform? I think the XMG laptops, electronics laptops, are going to perform really well, especially if you get the memory upgrade and the liquid cooler. Without the liquid cooler, I think they're going to underperform compared to most of the laptops out there. But with the liquid cooler, I think they're going to outperform most of the laptops. Do you feel like the Zephyrus Duo's main display is tilted back more than normal? Not really, no. No, I think it's tilted about what you'd expect. Warner Dryer says better than the Titan. I'm not sure what you mean. Is what? Oh, the XMG laptops. With the liquid cooler, the XMG laptops I think are going to be pretty competitive with the Titan in terms of GPU performance. Niebuhr says $500 over a 4080 is still very bad. I disagree. I disagree because if you're paying like $4,000 for a Blade 18, and you add $500 on top of that, what is that? I'm not sure what the Blade. I'm not sure how much it is. It depends on the laptop model, right? But let's just say it was a $4,000 laptop for the 4080. Well, the GT77 is a better example. Let me just pull that up. Well, the BIOS update's going. It's almost done, but let's just go ahead and pull this up here. Here's some data for you, all right? So it really depends. So GT77, a 4080 costs $42.99. A 4090 only costs $300 more for a 4090. That's it. $300 for an upgrade to a 4090. That is the cheapest RTX 4090 upgrade out there. But even if it was $500 to upgrade at that price point, that would be, it's like a 15% performance gain. $42.99 minus, let's see here, divided by, let's do $500. Sorry, it would be $500 divided by $42.99. So, oops. So $42.99 divided by $500. That's not it. I need to do $500 divided by $42.99. Okay, so why did it do that? What the heck? I pressed Alt F4 and it messed up calculator. Let me reopen calculator. I'm such an idiot. All right. Okay, I think that may have fixed it. Let's go 500 divided by $42.99. Okay, so that at $500 increase, if the 4090 was $500 more, that would be an 11.6% increase in price. And the 4090, I believe, in GPU-bound games gives you 15% additional performance. So in that scenario, I think it would be super worth it. It'd be super worth the money to get the 4090. But it really varies. It really varies from laptop to laptop. Looks like the Zephyrus Duo is what? This BIOS update. Okay, let me try typing in a password. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, the password worked. That was really weird. Looks like I have to reset up Windows Hello from that BIOS update. Super weird. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and open up our undervolting, and we're going to reduce it down to minus 25 now. We are in manual mode. Fans are blowing. That's all correct. We got to ignore minus 25. So minus 25 may be what our undervolt that's stable is on this laptop. I'm guessing it's going to be minus 25. So, because we had stability in everything. We were stable for everything overall. And it's really weird that we only just now ran into instability. Okay, so we're trying to load PassMark again. Let's see here. Maybe it's under performance test. Did it not fully install? I'm getting mad at PassMark right now. I'm like, what the heck is this? All right, so this was... Let's try reinstalling PassMark. It looked like it did not install correctly. All right, so we're launching the performance test. Error during startup. Problem has occurred with your installation. You need to uninstall. Okay, so we need to uninstall PassMark. See, this is why I didn't want to do PassMark. Having to deal with, like, I run into these kinds of bugs all the time when I'm setting up these things, and I just like to be able to test everything, make sure everything goes smoothly, you know? So if this doesn't work to get PassMark installed and running, we're gonna skip PassMark and just move on. So last chance for PassMark to work. All right. And I'm just gonna go into here. I believe it was this one. I'm going to delete performance test. Out. There. And now, hopefully this will be a fresh install now. Okay, we're not doing PassMark. Sorry. Okay. I believe that's all of our synthetic tests, and we're ready to move into our gaming tests. Please do crystal DiskMark on the Duo 16. I don't think I have DiskMark installed on either one of these. All right. Here we go, everybody. It's time for some gaming tests. So we're going to do Dead Space. You know, Red Dead Redemption is a very CPU-bound game nowadays. I don't know if you've seen Red Dead Redemption being CPU-bound, but it is very CPU-bound nowadays. And so I think we should do Dead Space, Red Dead Redemption at 1080p. We should, because that's a very Ryzen-focused, favored game that will give Ryzen maybe one win at least. We got to throw Ryzen a bone, you know. If we can, I guess, I don't know if we can do Red Dead now that I think about it, because it's an online-only DRM BS game. So I'm guessing we won't be able to do it, actually, now that I think about it. So I'm getting Afterburner set up in this, the Scar 16 right now. You can see what I'm doing here. Basically, this is going to let us get the overlay going, so we can see all of our temps and performance metrics. I already got this Duo set up because I did the live stream with it already. But I just haven't done anything on the Scar 16, so some of this still needs to be set up. There's so many dang CPU options to click. Bingo. All right. And benchmark keys. All right. All right, that's all set up. Browsing through electronics. Sweet. Bingo, bingo, bongo. All right, and so now we're gonna get into Steam on both of these. So the tricky part about game benchmarks right now is that we are essentially gonna try to go offline on both laptops on the same account. And right now Steam is being a pain in the butt and not opening on the Duo. There it goes. All right. Sweet. So we got Steam. They're both in offline mode, which should allow us to at least do Dead Space. Dead Space being a very CPU-oriented bound game. This should be very interesting. It says I have to go online to launch it. Jeez. Okay, so we're going to go online mode. We're going to launch into it. Warzone 2, I don't have two accounts to play with. That's the reality. I can't do Warzone 2 side by side. I could load into one, do a test, and then load into the other and do a test. And I already did do that in a sense. But Warzone is one of the most interesting ones to test, I think. Jeez. Now, in order to run it on both, we have to... It's giving me the same error on both of them. I have to go online in both, so... I'm gonna... Now that I've launched it, maybe it'll let me go back into offline mode. Man, I might have to actually get a second Steam account and rebuy these games on a second account. Spend like $1,000 rebuying all these games in order to do these side-by-side tests without problems. We'll see. We'll see. I hope not. I'm hoping I can do this on one account. Which laptop's fan is spinning loud? It's they're both spinning loud, but I would say the Duo 16 is the louder one. The 7945HX is behind in games. So the Evan one, yes. So I did some tests in the previous. We got an open afterburner, looks like. So I did some tests using the laptop in the unbox mode. All right, so there's one. One's loaded in. We need to get the other one loaded in. Good. And for this one, I'm going to change the position of the afterburner text so that way they're like centered towards each other. So the text over here will be on the right, and then the I want the text for the SCAR to be a little more to the right here, so I'm going to make it a little further over. Cool. All right. So, interesting results here. Let me try to make this a little bit better color-wise and get these displays to be the same brightness level. All right, and all right, so I'm gonna reset the power. I'm gonna reset the averages right now. So I just reset the averages. We're gonna let it sit here in this test for a moment here. Wow, it's interesting. This is not at all the result that we saw previously with the i9, or sorry, with the Ryzen. Because the first time I tested this, the power was going up to like 100 watts with the Ryzen. And right now it's not doing that at all. So I wonder if the recent BIOS update limited the Ryzen from going as high. Oh, there it goes. Now we're doing 100 watts. Okay, so I just reset it again. We'll let it sit here for like a minute. We're looking at the exact same sequence basically on both screens right now. Maybe this should be aimed over to the left just a little. Yeah, right like that. That's exactly framed the same now. So the i9 is averaging 8 more FPS. Dead space is so weird. It like pulls huge wattages and then it stops. It pulls huge wattages and then stops. You think it's getting lower scores due to being thermal throttled? I would disagree. I think that I think the clock wants. I mean, maybe it has like a stutter being caused by that, maybe. But so after we've been sitting here for like a minute, right? We've seen like spikes in the CPU temps and wattages on both. Very interesting. I'm gonna alt tab here, and I'm gonna change this to being 900 over. Dang, I was hoping that this would jump over to over here, but it didn't. Okay, so let's go ahead and just as much as we can, we'll try to walk in simultaneously here. It's so weird controlling two laptops at once. All right, I'm gonna reset the averages now. The averages have been reset. Whoop. I messed up the aim there. This is so interesting. You know, the more fair way to test this is probably going to be just setting both in turbo mode. Maybe the more fair way to test it would be both being in turbo mode so they both have the same power limit requirements. I don't know. All right, let's just go. We'll go forward here. I'm going to reset the averages again, resetting the averages. It's interesting that on the SCAR, we can't see the GPU percentage utilized. A little different. All right, so this is an interesting scene. I'm going to reset the averages here. And then I'm also going to try switching everything to the turbo fan mode after a moment here. GPU usage is missing. Yeah, I should probably try to change that. I don't know if it's just not available or what's going on. So GPU 2 usage. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, cool. And GPU 1. We can do the power percentage too. All right. Okay, I mean, it's a little bit funky with how it's all laid out. I don't know why it's all funkified there, but... All right. Resetting it now. Interesting. The performance is so similar right now between these two. But the Intel one is just going crazy, where the Duo is not. All right, we'll reset. We'll go look the other way now. All right, and now I'm gonna go ahead and set everything into turbo mode, okay? Instead of unlimited power, because the Intel is like super spicy temps wise, and I don't think it would be as spicy if we go into turbo mode, but maybe it will be just as spicy. I don't know. And I'll try putting both in them in turbo mode, which is gonna let Asus basically take control of the power limits and any boost clocks. All right. And the fan noise will also be reduced at the same time. We just reset everything as well. You need to off the iGPU. So, Dennis, we were doing that. I mean, yes, you could turn off the integrated GPU for ultimate mode in the i9. We were just testing the i9 though. Okay, we were just testing the i9, and we were utilizing that integrated GPU. That's why it's on. I mean, I could try it. Let's try it with it on, and then we'll try turning off the integrated GPU and seeing if it makes any difference at all. I don't think it will make any difference, but maybe it will. Maybe I could be wrong. And I'm actually very interested to find out. Right, this may be an interesting test. Okay. So turning it off, maybe it will make a huge difference. Maybe it'll be like a 5 or 10 FPS boost. Who knows? All right. So very interesting results. This is the power percentage. Our GPU utilization is not registering still. With NVIDIA, Niebuhr, he's not talking about that. He's talking about the integrated GPU. He's talking about turning it off so it doesn't use... So the GPU ultimate mode that he's talking about is where you disable the iGPU inside the i9 processor so that it does not utilize... I guess extra voltage, extra wattage, so you get slightly better temps, maybe slightly better performance on the i9. That's what he's talking about. So, and you have to restart in order to do that. We're already in GPU mode. So, all right. So just quick analysis. Right now we're getting 2% or 2 frames higher on the i9 with a little bit lower on the 1% lows, 37 versus 26 right now. Our GPU wattages are a lot more in line with each other now that we're both in turbo mode. And our wattage pull on the i9 is higher though at 60, 55 versus 46. Pretty interesting results there. All right, we're gonna go ahead and reset our benchmark and walk to the end, and then we'll try the integrated or the GPU ultimate mode for the SCAR. The AMD Ryzen does not even have that option, all right? So here we go. We're going to do a reset, and we're walking. We just reset for both. Need to aim a little bit differently here. I'm trying to make it as similar as possible images-wise. Right now for our settings, by the way, we're on ultra settings with DLSS on quality, QHD plus. I should probably double check our settings though, but I think we are in the same settings given that we're getting such close, tight FPS comparison here. Wow, it's so tight. These differences are so tight now that we're in manual turbo mode. 105.28, 105.39. And wow, the Intel CPU is actually cooler at 80 degrees. The Ryzen is hotter at 87. Even though the Ryzen is pulling less wattage, it's still hotter. Is this a Ryzen win? I don't think so. I think this is a tie, at least in this mode. But now we're going to restart the SCAR, and we're going to turn on GPU Ultimate mode. So this, if I can get it to So right here, it shows you we're going to go into GPU Ultimate mode. This, when you switch it into this, you have to restart the system in order to take effect. That disables the integrated GPU, so you cannot use things like Intel QuickSync anymore, like we did in Handbrake earlier. So if you're after video rendering performance, you really want to not turn that off. Okay, you want to leave that on. That is so interesting though that we got a tie here. This is one of the first times we've had a tie in Dead Space like this. And I would argue it's because we're in turbo mode on both laptops now. It gives them basically a fair shot at comparing the performance, I think, a little better than when in manual mode, at least because the Ryzen chip the Ryzen chip in manual mode, it used to boost to 100 watts. I'm guessing this new BIOS update stopped that from happening. So very interesting. The Duo's cooling is not as good. So I believe that is probably, I gotta switch this. I believe that is because of the 4nm architecture, making the CPU smaller, which means it has less area to dissipate heat. So it makes it trickier to cool down and keep cool. So we're going to get Afterburner going. We're going to pop back in. We're going to try to exit these extra games. We're going to go into offline mode. We're going to go into Dead Space. And why? It says I have to, for the first time, I have to launch it in online mode. What the heck? Come on. Steam offline mode is so trash. That's my honest review of Steam offline mode. Like, it is so hard to rely on it. Like, if you go on an airplane trip and you're like, sweet, I've put my computer to sleep in offline mode, and then you load the game up and it's not even working, or you can't access your games. That's happened to me. After that happened a couple times, I just gave up on Steam offline mode. Okay, so you guys can see this. Looks like we need to focus. There we go. All right, so we're in GPU only mode. Everything else should still be the same. We should still be in turbo mode, turbo fan mode. All right, we gotta walk down here. We gotta walk down with these guys. This isn't gonna be this is not a fair comparison right now because we got all these people on the screen. It's interesting, in turbo mode, we're still pulling really high wattage on the Intel i9. Isn't that interesting? But we're not pulling high wattage on the Ryzen. So after this, we're going to do one more manual fan test just to verify our results. And then we'll move on to the next game. Super interesting results, though, I think, overall. All right, so we're going to get down to the end here, and then we're going to turn around. Looks like I need to turn the brightness down on this display. Yeah. All right, and we're going to center that. Censor that. All right. Okay, so just to verify here, man, I wish Afterburner was giving us our GPU utilization properly. Let's pop over there. And let's also make sure that we're in the correct mode, in the GPU Ultimate mode. So GPU Ultimate mode is enabled. And we are in turbo mode. All right. And let's also just double check our display and graphics. We should be in DLSS quality ultra. That's good. Let's check our resolution. Let's just put that to 240 hertz. Shouldn't matter though, as far as rendering goes. And verifying our settings here on the Ryzen. 2560 by 1440, DLSS on quality. Ultra, yep. Okay, so we are correct on both, just like I thought. Very nice. Okay. We are good to go, I believe. Let me check chat. Can't see GPU temp on the SCAR. Oh, you're right. We can't. Why not? What the heck? Where is the GPU temps? We're looking for GPU 2 temp. No, we're looking for GPU 1 temp. Yeah, there's no GPU 1 temp in here. I guess we gotta load it in with HW info. I just wish I could get the overlays to look exactly the same. That's the problem. All right, and let's go down to GPU temp. And we're gonna go to RSS. We're gonna add it. Bingo. All right, so right here is our GPU temperature. Wow, we're doing 78 degrees right now, or 72. GPU on those, geez, it's 85. That's really hot. That is very warm, in my opinion. Okay, so we're gonna do turbo mode, then we'll do manually mode again, and then, yeah. So I just reset it. It didn't activate. For some reason, our benchmark's not activating on Afterburner. Oh, that's probably why. There we go. Okay. All right, and so we're gonna back up a little bit more. Perfect. Beautiful. All right. So now we're ready to start this. All right, we're starting it in 3, 2, 1. You're gonna need to aim a little more to the right. Wow, the results are so similar. It's crazy. Like, this is like a rounding error right now, basically. It's so similar in performance. Okay, we're gonna let it run for a couple seconds. All right, so 105, 105, so it's a tie. Now we're gonna set it into, on an Armory Crate, we're gonna go into manual mode. All right, and going to manual mode. All right, both of them are set to manual mode. Get ready for the turbojet engines to take off again. Takes a while to turn around with that little touchpad on the Duo. An advantage goes to the Ryzen for the 1% lows. I do agree on that. Though they both look smooth to me. You know, they both look very smooth to me. So now that we've raised the power limits, I'm expecting higher temps on the Intel, but better performance on the Intel. And I also want to point out that we did not see any increase to performance by going into GPU ultimate mode. It was no performance increase whatsoever. We still tied the Ryzen CPU exactly. So I don't think I would put this into GPU ultimate mode if I was using it, because I would want to be able to use video rendering. But that's obviously going to vary from person to person. All right, I think that is exactly the same. All right, so we're going to go ahead and reset. And we're walking. Interesting. Very interesting. I need to aim a little more to the left here. Huh. I guess the Intel going into manual mode is not really helping it that much. Huh. Very interesting result. Yeah, well, the interesting part is when you look at the wattage, the Intel one and the Ryzen one have been able to take more GPU into it. Sorry, what am I trying to say? In turbo mode, this goes down a lot. And in terms of raw wattage potentially being used, the Intel one uses a lot more right now. But we were seeing that really high GPU, CPU utilization, really high CPU wattage before, right? So it's so interesting to me how like that, I'm guessing that BIOS update is what changed things. Okay, so we're done with both of those. Let's do, I'm not sure if we can do Cyberpunk, but let's try to do Cyberpunk. I would love it if we could get through Cyberpunk. In general, though, given our temps and wattages there, I would give the win to Ryzen in the sense that we had lower wattage being utilized there and better temperatures. But when we were in turbo mode, we saw the same performance from Intel. So it's really just like, I think that's more of a BIOS thing. You know? I think it's more of a BIOS settings thing, and that both of them could give about the same performance when pulling high wattage and about the same performance at lower wattage. But even at the lower wattage, we had more performance per watt on the Ryzen. But so I would call that really closer to a tie. But our 1% lows were also a little bit better with Ryzen. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I would barely say Ryzen was better in that game. But the functional experience of the gameplay was the same. You know, like if you're playing the game on one laptop or the other laptop, you would not notice a difference. It would look and feel exactly the same. So that's like why I'm saying like it's pretty much a tie, but at the same time, Ryzen wins in a way. So, all right, so we're gonna do full screen on both Cyberpunks. And we're gonna try to make this CPU bound, okay? Let's go down to 1080p resolution, all right? We're gonna go 1080p 16:9. All right, full screen 1080p 16:9. Oh, that would have been interesting to try doing that in Dead Space too. Let's make sure we're on the same presets. Ray tracing ultimate, DLSS on quality. Okay. DLSS on ultra performance. Yeah, add ray tracing. It adds an extra CPU load. I agree. So we're doing ray tracing on ultra, 1080p, which is going to be more CPU focused than like a high resolution test. We could do DLSS on ultra performance as well, but I think we'll be CPU bound either way right now. So higher temps during loading on the Ryzen, but they're both really high, both above 90. Okay, here we go. Interesting, the loading speed was faster. The loading speed was faster on the Intel. Like, pretty massively faster, actually. Like, how is it taking so much longer? Our CPU wattage is doing 115 watts right now on the Intel i9. What is going on? We're getting some chop chop. Some chop chop on the Zephyrus Duo right now. Are we not plugged in? This test is obviously going to be invalidated. We're plugged in, showing battery status 100% fully charged. Oh, well, now we're getting the performance we should have been getting from the start now that I alt-tabbed in and out. That's interesting. Mitchell says this is such a roller coaster. I know. That is so interesting. Well, we're gonna have to redo this test anyway, but for the first result, we got 165. We got 164.66 right here for the first result on the SCAR 16 with a min of 56.6. So we're gonna restart it though, because that's not a valid test result. So I might as well get this loading back. All right. Looks like I need to make this not quite as far over either. Let's go 850. There we go. Okay. Screw it. Let's do DLSS on ultra performance. This is gonna make us super CPU bound when we do ultra performance, okay? So that's a good thing. That should be a good thing for our test results, our testing capability at least. Okay, I've reset both of them. Hey, or at least we're running at about the same time this time. The Zephyrus didn't choke. Our temps on the CPU are pretty nutty in both of these games. The wattage is much higher on the Intel, and the temp is even a little bit better on the Intel, even though it's pulling higher wattage. Our GPU utilization on the Intel is higher at 97%, but our actual frames are about the same. So it's very little difference in terms of frame rate. So far, actually, the Ryzen's average slightly higher. We can try turning off frame gen too if we want to, but it doesn't really matter. 101 degrees right now on the Ryzen. Very spicy temperatures, very spicy indeed. I feel like the Intel one's going to perform a little better given the higher wattage pull. It seemed like it did consistently higher wattage throughout that test, but yeah. So the Scar did 252 with the i9, and we got 244 on the Ryzen. So, and I'd say our 1% lows were higher on the Ryzen still, 131 versus 111. At least our min one, that's not 1% low, that's min FPS according to the benchmark. So, pretty interesting difference there. Geez, the thermals, you can make a meal with those. Yeah, it's pretty spicy on the temperatures, I'm not gonna lie. I'm tempted to run them in. I feel like it's almost a more realistic scenario running these laptops in turbo mode. All right, so we're gonna turn off frame gen, and we'll try running it one more time. Should be interesting to see if that affects anything. I gotta say, all of our loading times have been much faster. Oops. All of our loading times have been much faster on the Scar with the Intel i9. All of the loading times. I'm guessing that's because of single core threaded performance for load times. So I've reset it. So no DLSS now. It's no frame gen. All right, no frame generation is involved at this point now. And it'll be interesting to see if that affects things. Looks like the average FPS is now higher on the Ryzen CPU. But we have to actually see the actual benchmark results. Because the way this game calculates averages is like different than what Afterburner does. So we gotta look at the Cyberpunk result at the end. Is it the same SSD on both? I don't think so. It could also be related to the SSD. That's true. The SSD speeds could be related to the load times. But they are both running 2 terabyte SSDs. It's probably more likely to be related to the SSD than to the CPU, I think. So, all right, so we got 99 FPS on the Scar, 103 on the Ryzen. 99 and 59 for our 1% lows. And then over here on the Ryzen, we got 103.62. So the Ryzen basically gets a slight win in that one, where the Intel got a slight win with, or got a bit of a bigger win with frame gen on, which is interesting. I wonder if that's going to be a consistent theme that we're going to see. Where frame gen, it could also just be a variance, a testing variance. Let's go to Hogwarts. If we can get into Hogwarts and do Hogsmeade, that should be an excellent test. Will the G18 come with Ryzen in the future? No, that's going to come with the Strix. That'll be the Strix G17. If you want a Ryzen chip, you're going to need to, in the Strix series, you got to go to the G17. and I believe G15. So it said we had to launch it in online mode first, just like with Dead Space. When am I getting the Legion 7 tests? All right, so we're gonna exit the game. Now we're gonna go into offline mode. All right, see if we can get in now. All right, now we can go to online mode. And we're gonna launch Hogwarts. And then we're gonna have to exit Hogwarts. Bro, I hope you have a fire extinguisher, LOL. Well, I guess we could have just kept that load going. Syrup says, could you do a comparison in a couple of CPU-dependent games with running record in OBS for stream emulation, which is very useful for streamers? Well, I mean, Syrup, that's kind of what we're doing. We're doing some CPU-focused games, the games that really heavily utilize CPU, both Dead Space and Cyberpunk with DLSS and RTX. When those are enabled, it can be heavily CPU-focused. And same for Hogwarts. Hogwarts in Hogsmeade is incredibly CPU-focused. So... Freddie says, sorry boys, I'm switching to Ryzen. Well, you don't have to be sorry about that. That's fine. We should load into the same area, so I'm just gonna let it. We'll try out here in the middle of nowhere first. Look, there's Hogwarts there. So you can see some performance numbers while the SCAR is running, are getting loaded up. Some very high GPU utilization. You see that? Or sorry, very high temperatures and pretty high GPU utilization, 92%, 91%. It's because we're not in an area where there's lots of NPCs, right? We're in an area where there's very few NPCs. And so if I were... Let's just stand right here and we'll look over towards there. I guess we'll go into the sunlight so it looks a little cleaner. And we'll look at, well, yeah, let's go stand by this guy. This is a good idea. We'll go stand by this guy and we'll look over at Hogwarts. Boom. Okay. So we're going to make sure our settings are exactly the same because this is the first time I have loaded into this game on the SCAR. All right. And let's go in here. We probably have to restart the game because we have ray tracing on one. By default, it's off. And we need to set our textures to low. There we go. Boom. All right. All right, so here's our performance numbers right now, looking at Hogwarts. Standing around. The Alienware M18 and M16 should come with Ryzen eventually, yeah. And I think it should, in theory, be better. Once again, you guys, I just want to remind everyone, keep in mind that we are undervolted on both of these CPUs right now. But the undervolt that's on the Ryzen CPU is like peak undervolt versus the undervolt on the SCAR is not quite peak undervolt. It's a minimal undervolt. Yeah, King Dragon. In the Alienware M16 and M18 release notes, they did specify they're going to do AMD CPUs in the Alienware M16 and M18, and that's certainly sounds interesting. It could be really awesome. Tempted to switch from a G18 to a SCAR 17. I think it's a potentially good option. I should have a SCAR 17 coming here sometime this month. We'll see. I'd be interested to see how the Ryzen goes against a peak undervolted blade. Yeah, I think a better comparison would actually be like the GE78. The GE78 is a very it's a higher TDP level than the Blade 18. So it should, in theory at least, get better performance. Yeah. I'm thinking of getting the Lenovo Pro 7. Oh yeah, that's another AMD. That's another AMD focused one. So, all right. So we should both be in the same settings now. Let's go ahead and we're gonna let both of these bake in for a minute. All right. I gotta say our temperatures on the GPU are much better on the SCAR 16. The temps right now, at least we'll see if it bakes in higher. It's getting higher and higher right here. It's 71 degrees on our GPU temps. The Duo temps are 79. Obviously much higher. Sorry, yeah, here you go. All right, so we're baked. We're loaded into the same scene. You can see we've got essentially the same. I'll try to make it as similar as possible. Still got to go a little bit closer over here. There we go. Okay. Boom. All right, so that's extremely similar images. And now let's zoom in a little bit so you can see the details a little better. And I'm gonna go ahead and reset the averages. So the averages are just now resetting. All right, let's go ahead and do some comparisons. All right, so our GPU temperature is better on the SCAR 16, 5 degrees cooler, 4 degrees cooler. Our clock speeds going to the GPU are higher on the SCAR 16, 2150 versus 1930, 2000 over here. So the clock speeds going to basically our GPU throughput is higher on the SCAR 16. Our GPU watts being utilized is higher on the SCAR 16 at 160 versus 145. So about 15 to 20 watts higher of GPU utilization. And then our CPU temps are better on the Intel i9 at 80. We're in the high 80s on the i9. And with the Ryzen, we're doing 96. Our wattage utilization on the CPU is about the same at 77, 75. And our FPS average on the Intel i9 is higher with higher 1% lows. So we get about 10 more FPS right now in this i9. It's interesting though. It looks like the actual image that's being generated, it's like almost like a different time of day between these two or something. Interesting. Something is going on with the Zephyrus Duo. Okay, it was weird. Like it was all tabbed for a second there. So it wasn't quite showing. All right, I'm going to restart that. I mean, it's pretty close. It just looks like basically the time of day over here, like time has passed a little more because we were loaded in on here for a while waiting. What's going on with our... It's like it's being alt tabbed or something with this Ryzen. I don't know. I'm resetting it again. I think the performance numbers are legitimate though. We're getting about 10, 12 more FPS on the Ryzen, or sorry, on the i9. Okay. Let's jump over to Hogsmeade. Let's go to our map. Let's jump over to Hogsmeade. GPU utilization. So this isn't GPU utilization. This is power. I should probably take it off so it's not confusing. That's the power percent utilized, and that factors in dynamic boost. So 125% is like close to max, but I should just take it off so that it's not confusing to people. GPU power percent. Take that off, and the GPU power is not being shown correctly, so we're just going to take that off too. Interesting. It's not going away because of Reaver Tuner. I think needs to be reset or something. Okay, there. Now it's there. There we go. All right, so, I want this to be the exact same time of day, so I'm just gonna try to skip forward in time. All right, so that's good. Let's do it again. Because I want it to be daytime. All right, nice. All right, so I just reset the FPS averages. And let's go running around a little bit. We're gonna go over here on both of them. Wow, the FPS is so similar between both of them. Both doing 107 FPS. I think the time of day is still a little bit different between these two. Yet the average FPS is still so similar. Mike Mishler, whether it's worth buying the 4090 versus the 4080 is only a matter of whether you think it's worth it for you and that specific laptop. Because some laptops, it's more economically priced than others. So, you know, it really varies. In general, I think for most people, a 4080 is going to be plenty of performance. So in that sense, it's probably not worth it. It's just so interesting how the times here are different. And it's also interesting how the NPCs that are loaded in are also different. I think every time you load in, it's going to be different. Okay. So, let's go ahead and do a new... I just reset the averages, okay? And we're going to run up. We're going to try to make the same exact run. It's very difficult to control two computers at once. All right, I'm going to stop and reposition these to look correctly. All right, and we're going to continue. Kaboom. All right, so what did we learn? All right, both CPUs hitting over 90, 99 on the Ryzen. I saw 99 a second ago on the Intel too. Our GPU temps are a little better on the SCAR, not hugely better, three degrees cooler though. Our FPS was 98 and 96, but our 1% lows were much better on the Ryzen. Interesting. Maybe less stuttering happening on the Ryzen. It could be related to the RAM, but probably more related to the CPU. Huh? Interesting. So this is a game where very high temps are happening. Let's try switching into turbo mode on both laptops and seeing what our performance is like in turbo mode, because manual fan mode seems to be running these things just crazy strong. All right. There we go. All right, so we're gonna go turbo mode. All right, and we're gonna do turbo mode on both. Hold on, Asus is talking. All right. Okay, so we're gonna reset our averages now that we're back in turbo mode. So this is what this does when we switch from manual mode to turbo mode is it prevents the CPUs from pulling as high a wattage as what we were doing before. I believe that's gonna be the biggest difference. So our CPU temps should be better. Maybe our 1% lows should be better. I don't know. We'll see. So far, our temps are still pretty hot on both, but not too bad. So the update fixed the problem on the Ryzen. I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that it fixed it. And just in general, it's a lot better. Our 1% lows in general are much better in Hogwarts across all laptops, including Intel. I've been playing a lot. So we're sitting here in the same scene roughly, right? Looking at some NPCs running around. And our FPS right now on Intel is 4 FPS higher. There's some variability here, though. Let's go and do a run back towards the beginning. I just reset the FPS counters. So notice that this is limiting our CPU wattages on both Intel and Ryzen much more than they were being limited before. All right, so we're running. Wow, the Intel is pulling ahead now that we're in turbo mode. It's doing 7 FPS more. I was not expecting that. I was actually expecting it to be better. But our 1% lows are still better on the Ryzen. Doing 45 FPS versus 25. So a little bit less stuttering going on with the Ryzen. Again, not expected. Very interesting results, though. All right, so we got to try to get positioned as similarly as we possibly can here. Let's just stand next to the wagon. Okay, so that's pretty close. I want to center up on that, center up on that. All right, so we're going to be doing a test now on turbo mode run through. I have reset the FPS counters on both. But we had a big stutter on the Intel. And let's go ahead and recenter the aim. Okay, and so we ended up with 5 more FPS for our average, but 30 more FPS for our 1% lows. So if I were to take this, if I were to pick one of these two laptops in Hogwarts, I would probably pick the Ryzen because of the better 1% lows. And yet we're getting higher FPS overall on the Intel. So I guess that may also just depend on what area of the map you're in, because certain areas of the map are going to be more stuttery because there's a lot more NPCs. So, but in general, I'm thinking the Ryzen is the way to go for Hogwarts, probably. But the performance is very similar overall, though, I think, between these two. All right, let's go. Can we do Shadow of the Tomb Raider? Let's do Shadow of the Tomb Raider at low settings if we can. We'll do them on. We'll do the settings on 1080p. So we'll do 1080p with ultra performance, ray tracing enabled. All right, and we're gonna do exclusive full screen on both. All right, so this will be another very CPU bound game, at least in theory. All right, and we're gonna do highest settings, ray tracing on ultra. Well, yeah. Highest settings, ray tracing on ultra, but everything, we're doing ray tracing on ultra because ray tracing does impact CPU performance a lot. And then we're reducing everything using ultra performance. So it's kind of like we're trying to give it some demanding graphical things, but also ray tracing focused. So this will be interesting. Antonio Jackson says, it's so close, I don't think it would really matter. That is kind of true. I think that is basically very similar to my thoughts. But it also depends on the game. Because I'm pretty sure in Warzone, we were seeing higher performance. If you want to see Warzone comparison, I would say check out the unboxing. Because I can only log into one Warzone account at a time. So it's best to not do Warzone. And we're going to do a wrap up here after this game. A summary of all of the results that we've had so far. All right, 1080p, ultra performance, full screen, exclusive full screen. Everything's on ultra with ray tracing on ultra. And right now we're also in turbo fan mode, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind, that we're in turbo fan mode, which I think in this scenario for gaming, I think turbo fan mode's closer to how most people are going to want to tune their laptops. All right, so we're going to go ahead and run. Even though the other screen's not doing anything, could it have a performance impact at all? It shouldn't, Dane, be. It shouldn't have any impact, but it would maybe if you're not using, if both screens are not connected directly to the GPU, then maybe. But interesting, our averages so far are pretty dang close. Looks like the Intel is just barely ahead, but then here goes the Ryzen going up, getting some lead here. We're going to use the end game FPS counter as our final counter. So these FPSs don't necessarily matter that much, but the main thing to point out right now, what happened to our GPU wattage? Our GPU wattage went away. We can't see the GPU wattage, that sucks. I love how close AMD and Intel is so far, though. It allows people to choose, yeah. Squares 19. We're gonna do a summary of the everything we've found so far. So far, it looks like AMD might win this game. Hard to say. It's very close. Syrup says, thanks for the reply. Could you make a comparison when recording an OBS on Fortnite on low settings? Very interesting how 1% will behave in such a load. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's true. Maybe that would be a good separate streaming, like a good separate stream to do. I think that would be good. It's a good idea though, because I think like the best laptop for streaming is good. It's winning 20 watts less for AMD. Well, I would expect the wattage to be a little bit less on AMD, but right now actually it's less on Intel. You see that? It was less for at least a moment there. It depends on what area of the game we're looking at. It's not quite a perfectly synced either. The temperatures are better on Intel. The GPU clocks are a little better on the SCAR, which is the Intel. So the 2400 megahertz right now versus 2370 on the Ryzen. Our GPU temps are also still better on the SCAR by about 8 degrees. So that's interesting. Are we going to time spy? Oh, Steve, thanks for reminding me. Yes, we need a time spy too. We need a time spy before we're done. So yeah, I think the SCAR system cooling is a little better. Yeah, I think the SCAR's cooling system is a little better. At least for the GPU, it's a little better. And it seems to cool the i9 a little better, at least at the same wattage pull-throughs. The 1% lows. I would say that in general, the 1% lows seem to be better on Ryzen in almost all of these tests that we've done. So that's a really good sign overall. Okay, so here's our results. 187 on the i9, 186 on the Ryzen. So close. And for mins, our mins are actually better on the i9, 131 versus 129. So, so I zoom in a little bit, you can see there's the i9. Here's the Ryzen. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. You can see the SCAR is on a slightly newer driver, but this is the newest driver I can put on the Duo. It doesn't let me update to a newer driver. So I purposely didn't update this driver, even though it could, just to keep us as close as possible for driver parity. They're both 528 dot something. So they're both in the same ballpark of driver. Because the latest is like 531. I could put the SCAR on that, but then it'd be less accurate, I think. All right, so Time Spy. It's time to do Time Spy and see. Time to do Time Spy and see if we can get any additional performance out of the Time Spy. Is the SCAR 17 delay? I have not had the SCAR 17 being shipped or announced being shipped or anything, so we'll see. Would you say AMD wins this tie slightly? It's so close. I think the biggest. It's so close in AAA games so far that I would say that it's going to be more based on the type of game that you're going to try to play, because when we did the Warzone 2 testing, it was much faster on Intel. That's that game, and that's like we were getting like 155 FPS in that game and 130. And I feel like our 1% lows were usually a little bit better on Ryzen, but our overall FPS usually had a slight lead for Intel in almost all the games we tested. But some of them were tied. So it just depends. But I guess it depends on more. It depends more on what you value. If you value your 1% lows or your overall FPS. In general, I think both can be valuable. So I think you can't necessarily say that, oh, 1% lows matter so much more. But I do think they tend to matter more if it's a huge difference. If the 1% lows are like 25 and 35 or something, that's not that big of a difference. But if it's like 25 and like 70, like we had in Hogwarts, I feel like that's a big enough difference to say, yeah, the Ryzen chip won in Hogwarts. Even though the total FPS was better in Intel. So that's just kind of my thoughts on that, at least. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do Timespy. Like, after doing all of these tests so far, it's not making me say, oh, I got to get a Ryzen or, oh, I got to get an Intel. I think if you're going to use multi-core performance a lot, I would say the Ryzen has the advantage. And then inside of the game loads, it feels like Ryzen has an advantage for 1% lows, and then the i9 has advantage for overall FPS. That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. Intel's probably going to win Timespy. We'll see. We'll see Steve. Probably. 1000 hertz 1080p screens win. I don't know. We don't have any games right now that can go to 1000 frames per second anyway. Bald says, get what's available and cheaper. Yeah, that's basically my conclusion, that if you can get, like, if the Ryzen laptop ends up being priced less, go with the Ryzen. If the Intel laptop ends up being priced less, go with the Intel. I feel like pricing at this point matters more than the performance, because the performance between these two is similar enough that you're not going to see a big difference. I would say the only exception probably is, you know, when you look at the Intel QuickSync, that seemed to be 25% faster than the AMD equivalent, at least in Handbrake rendering time. So, you know, when you're looking at Handbrake or maybe video rendering, if your application can take advantage of Intel QuickSync, that may be enough by itself to shift you over into Team Blue. Because a 25% render time gain is one of the biggest performance gains we have seen out of all the tests today. And video rendering workloads can take like an hour or 2 hours even. So 25% off of like an hour long render. If you're a movie editor and you're literally doing like an hour and a half long 4K video render, that might be like a 5-hour render. Taking 25% off of that might knock a whole hour off the render time. So, I mean, just like, that's kind of like worst case scenario or best case scenario for Intel in that scenario. You think Ryzens are cheaper on average? Well, if you look at between these two laptops, the Duo costs $300 more, right? So it's really going to have tons of variability from unit to unit. And we need to see more laptops units come out. They're priced very competitively with each other these days, it seems like. Like the Scar 17 was $3,500, but that has a worse display than the Scar 16. And so I feel like it's worth getting the upgrade to the Scar 16 for the better display. But almost all the other parts between the two are the same. So it seems like the AMD and Intel parts are almost priced identically this year. But maybe there'll be like a sale on the Omen laptop that's $200 off like it was a few days ago. Like that may make it worth it to swing to Intel. But then next week, the Ryzen laptop goes on sale and it goes $200 off, and it goes and then the Intel one stops being on sale, and then it's a $400 swing in price, maybe from week to week even. So you really got to be looking and paying attention to the latest deals, I think. I'll be very curious to see what the Alienware M16 and M18 laptops are priced at, because we can get those spec'd exactly the same between the two, right? Luffy, can you justify the price from a 4090 to a 4080? I keep getting this question over and over again. I would encourage you to check out my 4080 versus 4090 test. The Scar 18 versus the Strix G18, and it's only like a 15% performance gain. So if if it's a 15% price increase, then it's worth it. You're getting your fair value for your 4090 upgrade. If it's more than a 15% price increase, then it's not worth going to a 4080. So in terms of justifying the performance per dollar, that's up to you. I personally want a 4090 just because I want the fastest laptop that I can get and get the best experience I can get. All right, so Timespy, here's our results. We ended up with quite a bit more. Oh, we're in turbo mode. All right, we're in turbo mode still on both these laptops. So that's turbo mode comparison, 19.9, 13.3, 21.1, 15.7. Let's go to manual mode and let's run this again. Let's run this back one more time. And we're gonna go to manual mode, run this back one more time. All right, and we'll close down Armory Crate this time. So that shows you the performance of the 4090 on the reduced power limit, right there. Because basically, I just clicked them both at the same time. I'm curious which one loads faster. But what am I trying to say? So the Zephyrus Duo 16 in turbo mode is slower on the total GPU utilization, which I suppose obviously could affect Hogwarts, right? We were running things in turbo mode sometimes, and we were getting better performance. We were getting just as good a performance in the turbo mode in those CPU-bound games. So I think that's very important context for this, is that when we were switching to turbo mode, we were reducing the GPU total TGP. But in those CPU-bound games, it literally didn't matter, right? It literally didn't matter because we were CPU-bound anyway. But that was why we were probably seeing, at times, at least in Hogwarts, the increased clock speed on the GPU in when we were both in turbo mode. It was 19.9K, Steven. So, yeah. 18.5K is more what a 175 watt 4080 would do. But, yeah. $600 more for a 4090. Luffy, that would be a hard. I mean, that'd probably be about average for your value. It's for 600 euros more. £600. Oh, okay, gotcha. 600 pounds. Either way, whatever currency it is, it doesn't matter. It's the same ratio. It's all about your percentage. If the 4090 costs more than 15% more, then it's probably not worth the upgrade, unless you just want more performance. And a lot of people, usually the highest end performance parts almost always end up costing more performance per dollar because it's like a premium, going up to that. Yeah, Steven, your G18, if it's OC'd, it might get 19K, yeah. Gary says, Intel loading quite a bit slower on this. Yeah, I think it might be because we're in online mode with the SCAR 16, and it's like trying to check with the online servers or something. I don't know. It's probably something related to that. And typically, we've been seeing some faster load times in most games on the SCAR 16. In the vast majority of titles. So that's pretty interesting. The Evan one, yeah, the Legion 7 and the Omen 17 both undercut what some of the RTX 4080 laptops cost. The 4090 version of the Omen 17 and the Lenovo Pro 7i, both of those can significantly undercost other RTX 4080s, like literally cost less with a 4090. So it really depends on laptop to laptop, whether you should go to the 4090, stick with the 4080, etc. So we're doing 95 watts in the Timespy CPU test. Let's see what we do for our wattage level on the i9. You can't really look at, well, we're not getting our overlay to pop up. There it goes, 130 watts, 144 watts on the i9. So a lot higher wattage on the i9. Okay, so now that we're doing 175 TDP on the Zephyrus Duo, we got 21,676. All right, and we got 21,174 on the SCAR 16. Interesting, our scores flipped. Now we have more performance on the Duo, but our CPU scores are significantly higher in the 16,152 versus 13,529. So, yeah. All right, so once again, I would invite you to like this live stream, subscribe for more laptop detailed comparisons, benchmarks, question and answer live stream sessions. Let's talk performance i9-13980HX versus Ryzen 9 7945HX. Let's do a summary. So for this test, we had both laptops undervolted, though the Ryzen laptop had a better undervolt, okay? I would expect better i9 performance in other laptops, right? In the Blade 18, we'd have better i9 performance, especially since it has faster RAM, but these both have the same speed RAM, very similar timings on the RAM as well. And so that helps make this a more apples to apples comparison. The bigger difference, though, is definitely the Ryzen's undervolt really helping boost multi-core performance and potentially gaming performance and CPU temps when compared to the SCAR 16. I would be curious to do this test against an i9 that has better undervolting potential, like the MSI GE78HX. That's what I was going to do this comparison with, but then I thought the SCAR 16, being that both of these are the same size chassis and they're both designed by Asus, we would be able to get, and same liquid metal conductonaut extreme on both of these laptops, gives it a little bit more of a fairness to it. But the fact that we have better undervolting settings and potential on the Zephyrus Duo 16 should be taken into account into our evaluations and comparisons here, okay? So inside of the games, I believe that the Intel i9, in several of the games we had more FPS, but our 1% lows were better on the Ryzen. For multi-core workloads, we saw better multi-core performance from the Ryzen almost always, with some exceptions. We had the Intel Quick Sync in Handbrake still kicking AMD's Boutier. But when you're doing raw rendering, like in an application that doesn't support Intel Quick Sync, we saw better performance on the Ryzen. So yeah, and in Blender, we saw better performance on the Ryzen, significantly better, like 10 to 15, 20%. In Timespy, we saw better performance on the Intel. In the past test, I did a Warzone 2 comparison, which I could show briefly here. Might as well just throw it in, because you guys, I might as well just keep it in all in one video here. Let me pull it up, and this way you can see the performance. So I did an unboxing of the Duo 16, and we tested Warzone. And in our Warzone test, Warzone 2, all right? So in this test, we were doing like around 100 and, you know, so in this test, we land on this bridge, we run around, we fight. So we're coming in, we land. I'm interested in the FPS once we land. So we're doing 145. And notice the wattage and power limits here. It's very hot. And very hot and very high wattage and power limit. That's because we're in manual fan mode, pushing maximum possible performance. All right, and then I go ahead and switch it in Afterburner to turbofan mode, and now you can see we're getting 128. So it significantly dropped our wattage and temperatures down, but our FPS took a big tank. Like that's like 15, 20. Like it's a pretty significant drop in FPS, okay? to be able to do that. But this is definitely a lot more sustainable in the long haul. I think a better balance would probably be doing something like 75 watts in manual mode to get a better balance of performance and FPS. And then if I were to show you an Intel benchmark that's in a similar vein, we can go to the Omen benchmark. And I believe I did Warzone in this one. Let's see. So did we do Warzone? I'm not seeing Warzone. I did Warzone. I did Warzone on the Blade 18. So the Blade 18. That's not the right Blade 18. We gotta go to the Blade 18 benchmarks. There it is. All right, so here's Warzone on the Blade 18. And see, once we get landed, we're in the same area. We're doing 155 FPS on the Blade 18, which is much higher FPS, and our temps and our wattages are also in check at 65 watts. So it's really like, I think Warzone's a memory sensitive game, and I'm anticipating that we would get even better FPS on both of these laptops if we can have faster RAM. Because we have 5600 megahertz RAM on that Blade 18. That's going to make a big difference in terms of performance. Yeah, so looking at some chat, Stephen actually says, another great stream. Thank you for a great stream. Great stream, but why? Let's hit the likes, Brandon. For Brandon, he is too important person here. What? Okay. Thank you guys so much for your positive feedback. Overall, I think it's super interesting. All of these results really point in the direction that the most important thing when you're choosing between an i9-13980HK and the Ryzen 9 7945HX is pricing. Because the performance between these two, in general, it's in the same ballpark. And unless you're talking about a very specific game that's very CPU bound, like Warzone or whatever, you're probably going to get in the same ballpark of performance. And that if a laptop, say, a $500 or $1,000 cheaper between the Ryzen or Intel, you're better off going with the cheaper option, most likely. And if you're focused on CPU bound gaming, I would say focus more on getting a good combination of CPU and RAM speed. You're getting that 5600 on like the Razer or some of these other laptops, like XMG even has a 6400 megahertz option on their RAM. So I'm very curious to see what the Neo 17 does with like 6400. I don't think XMG is sending that laptop to me with 6400. I think it's 5600 is all I'm getting, but I think they said they were sold out or something. So yeah. Anyway, but XMG is sending me one of those, and it's already shipped actually. So I've got a tracking on that. And I think RAM is important for Intel and Ryzen. So I think Ryzen it's important too. But it's important in both for this generation. So you can't ignore RAM speeds if you play CPU bound games. If you don't play CPU bound games, the RAM speed is not going to do anything for you, pretty much. Very little. It might improve your CPU benchmarks or your utilization of software programs, but for gaming, it only really applies and is helpful in the CPU bound games, which most games are not CPU bound at QHD resolution. So memory is only going to be helpful in certain titles and in certain applications. So that's where it's like, it's only worth spending the extra money if you're aware that you play Warzone and therefore you want your better RAM speed. Or you just want to have the fastest possible speed no matter what the game is, get the better RAM speed. It's just easier to be like, yes, get the 5600 because it's going to be faster in the vast majority of times. With the exception that maybe like the latency or timings are faster on like a 4800 module, but that's gonna be super rare. So, and 5 to 10 frames won't really matter. Well, Antonio Jackson, the whole point of this channel and other channels, review channels, is to help people figure out if the laptops are the same price and one has 5 to 10 more FPS, why not get the laptop that has better FPS, right? That's kind of a big focus in my channel, trying to help people wade through those choices. And right now, given the options that we're seeing today and the results we saw today, it just seems like both are in the same ballpark. And that I think that most likely if you went with a laptop like the Blade 18 with faster RAM, you're probably going to outbench both of these laptops with the faster RAM. At least that's my impressions right now, at least in CPU bound titles. So that's kind of a brief summary. Like if you care about CPU bound gaming performance, get the laptop with 5600 as the focus more so than with the i9 or the Ryzen, really. I think that's a fair summary or like thing to say. I'll have to think about that. Don't take that 100% to heart. We need to verify that information. But that's what I'm leaning towards saying, is that getting the faster RAM is more important in CPU bound games. So DDR5 has higher latency than DDR4 though. Interesting, Michael. I think that's going to vary from stick to stick. And it also, based on how RAM works, it can be very unique in terms of how it affects frame rates between the timings, the clock speed, and the latency. So all three of those things come into factor, right? So the Evan one says technically it's 4800 RAM with CL34. That's the fastest on the market. That may be true. That may be true. I don't know. I'm not a full 100% expert on RAM speed. Okay. I have more to learn about RAM, but I do know that some games do perform better, obviously with faster RAM, and that I don't think the RAM in these two laptops that we had today was particularly fast 4800 megahertz RAM. That's for sure. Like this RAM speed was more on the slower side, I believe. Zidian says, $2 super chat. Thank you for the detailed test. I'm getting the Duo now. Cool, man. Well, at least when we were comparing between these two laptops, it's a very fair comparison. So, yeah. Marksman says, what's your experience between the 4-fan versus 2-fan plus liquid metal or vapor chamber? Well, I think the Blade 18 is fantastic, Marksman. And that uses a vapor chamber. I really think that heat pipes, vapor chamber, liquid metal, regular CPU paste, it really comes down to the overall thermal package, how the laptop's tuned, how beefy and big the fans are, the exhaust fins. Like there's so many factors in a thermal cooling solution that you can't just say, oh yeah, this one only has 2 fans, it sucks, or this one has a vapor chamber, so it's so much better than heat pipes. Because we're seeing lots of laptops with varying thermal solutions doing really well. So it really depends. So yeah. Can you upgrade the RAM in the Zephyrus Duo? Can you put DDR5 5600? I'm not sure. Asus would need to make sure the BIOS is compatible with faster RAM if you wanted to upgrade the RAM to a higher speed. And talking to the Asus product manager, he basically said that their plan was to investigate potentially allowing the SCAR series, at least, to upgrade the RAM to 5600, because that's the Intel rated spec, so it should be able to go to that, at least from a motherboard chipset perspective. And it was just a software issue whether they can enable the XMP profiles to allow it. And it sounded like they were investigating it, testing it, so that way at least users could upgrade the RAM on these laptops after the fact and put faster RAM in there for the improved performance. So sweet. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here, guys. I hope that was really helpful for anyone that's comparing these two CPUs. And I'll have more live streams coming up for you soon. I've got the SCAR 16 here. We're gonna do a live unboxing and detailed focus testing of the SCAR 16, I think tomorrow. That's the plan. All right. Have a good one. Brandon, out. Now I gotta press